Chapter 62. Under the hard work of Guan Yu and Chun Feng, large areas of the Golden Pearl were planted with fresh flowers. Looking around, it was like a sea of flowers, and the fragrance of fresh flowers permeated the air. The sea of flowers was surrounded by a forest, and from the bamboo house came the moving sound of the zither. Listening to the zither, the busy Guan Yu and Chun Feng seemed to be enjoying it very much. Standing in the sea of flowers, the white 10 fingers skillfully pressed when she heard the sound of the zither. She raised her hand and tucked a strand of hair. The sound of the guqin was sometimes impassioned. She turned her head to look in the direction of the bamboo house. Accompanied by a smile appeared on her beautiful face. It could make one forget all the unhappiness would take time to come to the Golden Pearl. At this moment, although he came with a smile every time, one only needed to be the white fox could see that he seemed to be hiding some bitterness in the sea with him. But even the sea seemed to be influenced by he would always force a smile. The sound of the guqin. In the bamboo the waves were sometimes turbulent and sometimes the white fox rarely the seagulls flying above the sea also increasingly ignored the every time he came, he would randomly play for a while. Yin Zishia's eyes were a little dazed playing the zither randomly. Suddenly, and the noise made by the guqin made the other three feel unbearable. The sea laughed. In the end, surging tides the white fox could not stand it anymore. Floating, seeing that he was in a bad mood, she did not want to restrain him. The heavens so she decided to teach him one after another. The white fox was a fox spirit who had played the zither for hundreds of years. The rivers and her zither skills were natural. The misty rain is far no matter how stupid the waves wash away the mortal world. It was no problem. How many do you know? The common people laugh. No longer zither skills could not be said to be as still there as the white laughing foolishly. But he could definitely be regarded as a good player. Yu Qianshou repeated the song over. This was something that Yu Qianshou his 10 fingers waved freely. Who could let him hold a 7-string log all the unhappiness of the zither in peace? Fortunately, this might be the so-called misfortune. Maybe she knew that she had missed out on such a good song by her brother. When Yu Qianshou played, she would definitely all kinds of beautiful songs. The eyes on the cliff stared at the back of her free. And the white fox was secretly surprised at her little brother's becoming more and more blurred. Unbeknownst to them, a strand of world that Yu Qianshou lived in, which had been sealed the prosperity of music, was not something finally that saw the light compared day to day. The efficiency by the song, of the dissemination wrapped around the back was something that people it was tightly tied did not even dare to think about. Many years later, had this back was something she could not forget. So he had a clear mind. Yu Qianshou's unintentional action. He had learned to play the zither from a good teacher. I wonder what the name of this song is. Naturally able to play it with ease. Yin Zixia. Every time a new song the meaning of the lyrics, white fox's eyes, the ocean laughed with amazement, the heavens laughed, Guan Yu and rivers and mountains laughed, who were busy in the breeze laughs, looked at each other. Common people laughed. Previously, the two of them were already deeply shocked by Yu Qianshou's profound knowledge in zoology, sinking with the waves, botany. Only remembering they didn't expect their boss to be so talented in music. But can you remember the two of them had also heard the misty rain that the white fox had played. The waves wash away the mortal world. And they already looking at her. How many do you know? From time to time, what do you remember? She would look at the carefree. How dare you provoke loneliness? Added Majugu made you also attracted by not Qianshou's no longer zither music. Do you have someone of them were intoxicated? Who told not Qianshou and the law forget himself still there? The more of them said something that the more quite optimistic in front of him surged all over his thought their boss was indeed but she did not know that after learning their behind her skills he immediately had to admit that after listening with a smile on her face there was one time she had when Yu Qianshou changed more than 10 she also had to admit that she had misjudged the style of the songs was not the slightest bit different. She didn't expect that there was such a great peerless talent. After he left in her mulberry garden, the white fox stood in the sea of flowers. It's a pity that such gifted scholar stared in the direction of the bamboo house. But he's a good she stood there for an entire night, carefully recalling every song. Majugu thought to herself, her mouth was full of bitterness. Don't you want to know the name of that song? She played the zither for hundreds Granny will help you figure it out. And she thought that you don't have to worry that he won't compare with her attainments in zither great-grandmother, however, let him remember you she did not expect that although she was not compare with her brother. She lifted the walking stick in her hand the zither fiercely poked it on the rock. Who would believe it if she said it? She shouted in a loud voice. But she believed that Yu Qianshou, which child is it that taught her step by step and is making naturally knew that her brother really knew nothing about playing the zither before. As expected of a consecrator of the supporting immortal island, who could compare with cultivation was indeed profound. With just a casual shout, the sound it emitted was able to suppress the sound emotions in the bamboo pavilion. Had no idea that he had shot the three of them and quickly turn around. After
When
she
she
saw
saw
her
her
great
he also
grandmother's
disappeared.
angry expression,
She staggered back
She couldn't
to the
help but
mulberry
turn
garden.
pale and fright.
At the door of the utility
She thought
room,
to herself,
Furlong was waiting
when did
for him with a
great
shoulder
grandmother
pole
come and a dung
Did she hear what I
ladle,
said
guarding
just
2
now?
buckets of dung?
Yu Qianqiu was
And he
shocked.
was already used to it.
Why was there someone else
Yu
here?
Qianqiu shook his
The
head
sound of his
and
zither
smiled
came
in
to an
surprise.
abrupt stop.
What had he done in
He
the
quickly
past year?
stored it into a
He could
storage
not
pouch
steal the
and
spirit
leaped up.
herbs.
He finally
Nor could
noticed
he
the
get
2
the
people on the
seeds.
cliff
He
behind
could
him.
not even get his sister in the mulberry
Isn't that Ma
garden,
Jugu
let alone the
and
plan to get the
Yanzixia?
seeds
Why are
from
they
the
here?
Yanzixia.
It's over.
She had never
That
seen
old
her
woman
before.
seems to be
He
very
often
angry.
carried out the spirit
What should I
of
do?
Hugh
Not many
and
people can
comforted
withstand the
himself.
wrath of an
It's
old
not that I'm
monster like
incompetent.
her. Damn
It's just that the people
I'm afraid
in the
of
cultivation
birds.
world
If worse
are
comes to
too
worst,
abnormal. I'll leave.
If the things were in
It's
the
just a
hands
pity
of
for the
ordinary
foundation
people,
establishment
I would have gotten
but
them
my
long
life
ago.
is still more
Although he
important.
said so,
A series
in
of
fact, he was
thoughts
quite shocked.
flashed in his
He
mind.
had doubts about the
After
ability
analyzing
of
the
the former
situation,
and current boss.
Yu Qianqiu
Marshal Uncle
respectfully
Furlong,
bowed and
I made
said,
you wait for a long
Disciple
time
Yu
again.
Qianqiu
Yu
greets
Qianqiu took the
consecrated
shoulder
Jugu
pole
with a smile.
Disciple was
hung the buckets on
presumptuous
it and
put it on his
didn't know
shoulder
that consecrated
and walked
Jugu
out of the
was here.
courtyard.
Otherwise,
Furlong said,
Disciple
no.
would never
She
dare
followed him
to
with
disturb
2 dung
consecrated
ladles,
Jugu.
one long
When
and
Yanzixia
one short.
heard this,
The
a
short
thought
one was
flashed
made
in her
by
mind.
Furlong herself,
Fortunately, saying that it
didn't
was
know.
convenient
Otherwise,
to fertilize.
would you still come here
These
and
two
sing?
were the most unconventional
Ma Jugu
combinations
snorted
of the
with a
mulberry
frosty
garden.
expression.
They went to the
Her
dung
voice
pit
echoed
outside
on
the
the
wall
beach
one
and the
after
cliff
the other
for a long
filled
time.
it with fertilizer
Yu Qianqiu
and
secretly
carried the pole
thought
back.
that she was
There were
very
more
powerful.
than a dozen spirit herb fields.
He quickly
in the mulberry
bowed
garden.
and said,
fertilizing
forgive
the
me.
roots, consecrated
Each
Jugu
spirit herb
disciple
needed to be
knows his
watered a
mistake.
little. I'll go
No
back
more,
now.
no
I won't
less.
dare to disturb
After
you
all,
again.
spirit
After
herbs
saying
were
that,
not cabbages.
he quickly ran
so it
to
was a
pick up
test
his
of
shoes and
experience.
socks,
A spirit
and put them
herb
on
field
before running
needed about a
away.
bucket.
A trace of
fertilizer.
disappointment
Yu
flashed
Qianqiu had to
in
carry it several
Yanzixia
times
eyes,
every day,
but it was all seen
and he
by Ma
basically
Jugu.
spent half a day here.
She thought to herself,
Qingqiao,
see how I really
I heard
likes
that the
him.
foundation
Did I say you can
pills
go?
will be issued
Ma
in 10
Jugu
days.
pointed her walking
Yes,
stick,
and
Senior
shouted
Marshal's
coldly.
sister Lulu,
Yu Qianqiu,
I'm so nervous,
who had just run a few steps,
I'm really afraid that I
suddenly
won't be
stopped
able to
and
successfully
didn't dare to
build
run
my
anymore.
foundation. He knew that it
Don't
was
worry.
better to be obedient
People like
now.
us who were selected
If he
to join
angered
the
her,
mulberry garden,
even if he escaped
have
back
good
to the
aptitudes
Golden
in
Pearl,
Wanfen garden,
he would never be able to
definitely
return to
succeed
supporting
in building our
Immortal Island.
foundation.
He would
on
also
first
never
try.
be able to obtain
They were going to
the
issue
foundation
the foundation
establishment
building
again.
pills.
He could only
Yu Qianqiu
immediately
and
stop
salute.
what he was doing,
Disciple
turn his
obeys
head to look at the 2
consecrated
young girls
Jugu's
who were pulling
instructions.
weeds in the
Ma
neighboring field,
Jugu poked
and
the
pricked
ground
up
with
his
her
ears
walking
to listen.
stick and said
That's true.
coldly,
I don't like to
disciples
talk to
selected
people
to
from
join
so
the
far
mulberry
away.
garden.
Come up,
all
I have something to
top-notch
ask you.
in Wanfen garden.
Yes. I don't
A
think
trace
I've
of
heard
joy
of
flashed
any
in
seniors in the garden
Yanzixia
who have
eyes.
succeeded in
Ma
building their
Jugu saw it,
foundation, but
more than
pretended not to
twice.
see it.
And
Hey, if
old
we really
woman,
can't succeed,
don't you know how to come down?
We'll just wait
It's
for
so
another
high
3
they'll have to
years.
climb up.
We have
Yu
3
Qianqiu
chances,
didn't dare to
so
say
there
it out
won't be
loud.
any problems.
He looked at the nearly 10
After the
meter
2
high
young
cliff
girls comforted
cave
each other
and
obediently
laughed
climbed up
and changed
Although
the
his
topic
cultivation
and began to talk
wasn't
about
high,
who was the most
climbing a
beautiful.
mountain was a
Yu
piece of
Qianqiu
cake.
was startled.
As soon as Yu
His heart
Qianqiu
was
reached
beating
the
fast
cave
from their
entrance,
words.
he felt
But
a
they didn't
wave
say
of heat
anything.
coming at him.
He couldn't help
He didn't
but
think
curse
too
in his
much
heart.
and immediately
Damn it.
saluted. It's none of your business
Consecrated
whether
Jugu,
other people are
Marshal
beautiful or
Uncle
not.
Yin.
Why are all
Yanzixia
women like
nodded
this? And smiled at
After
him.
patiently
Ma Jugu
tending to a
poked
field
the ground with
he
her
couldn't
walking
hold
stick
back anymore.
and turn around.
He put down the
saying,
things in his
"Come with
hands.
me." And with a
Yu
face full of
Qianqiu didn't know
smiles,
what she was
he
going
walked
to do,
towards the spirit
so he
herb
vigilantly
field
looked
next
around.
door.
No wonder the two
So it's the
suddenly
two
appeared
beautiful
on the
senior
cliff.
Marshal sisters.
It turned out to be a
Qing
cave.
Qiao.
He didn't
and
know where
Lulu.
it led to.
Yu Qianqiu
So he had no
laughed
choice but
coquettishly.
to follow them
The
inside.
2 girls,
The cave
who were
walls were
squatting
inlaid
and
with
pulling
fluorescent
grass,
stones
heard him
to
and
illuminate
looked
the
over.
path down.
When they saw Yu
Qianqiu
Qianqiu could
walking
feel
over,
the 3
they
of
both
them
stood up,
heading downward.
It seemed like they were
Not
familiar
long
with
after,
him.
he saw
Yu
a
Qianqiu,
red light
don't come any
flashing in a
closer.
bend in the cave
Qing
wall
Qiao
ahead,
frowned,
and the
and
temperature
her tone was
getting
very
higher.
unfriendly.
Just as he was wondering where the 2 of them were taking him,
Yu Qianqiu
a wave
laughed
of heat
and said,
came rushing
I just
at
want to
him
ask these
as
2
soon as he
senior
turned the
Marshal
corner.
sisters a few
What he saw in front of him
questions.
shocked him.
After I'm done,
The 3 of them were on a
I'll leave
stone
immediately.
bridge that wasn't very wide.
Seeing him continue
Deep
to
under the
walk
bridge,
over,
a
red
two
liquid
girls
was
pinched their
surging
noses
like boiling
and took a
water,
step back.
and red bubbles were
Lulu
popping
shouted,
up and popping.
"Yu Qinsho, if you come any closer, volcanic
be
magma."
polite anymore. Yu Qinsho raised his arm and sniffed his
Chapter
sleeve
65.
and said sincerely,
Ma Jiugu,
I put medicine on
who was walking
so
in
it
front,
really doesn't stink at
stopped
all, and turn around.
If you don't believe me,
Most people call
you
it
can smell
fire
it.
dragon,
As
but
he said
very
that,
few people
he extended
know
his
that it's
arm
called
towards the two
volcano
girls.
lava.
It
Senior
seems that you're
Marshal
quite
sister.
knowledgeable.
Let's go.
You actually
Don't
know what
mind
it
him.
is? Qing Xiao
Yin
pulled
Zixia
Lulu
gave him
and
a
said,
meaningful look,
and the latter
Yu
nodded.
Qinsho
Just
shook
like
his
that,
head.
the
and
two girls
smiled
left with
bitterly.
a look of
It's
deep
nothing.
hatred.
I've only heard
F
about it before.
*CK. Ma
Yu
Jiugu
Qinsho
grunted
sniffed
and
his body
continued
again.
walking forward.
And after confirming
This was his
that there
first
was
time
no
walking
smell,
on a volcano's
he said
lava.
indignantly,
He felt like he had
Didn't
seen
the
it
things
in a
I
movie.
picked out by the two
Suddenly,
of you?
why
You
are you
recall
hiding?
that the color of the
Damn it.
rocks on the
If you're
peak
so
of Alchemy
capable,
Pavilion
come and
was
poop.
the same as the rocks outside.
Chapter
Moreover,
63.
The temperature on the
After
mountain
encountering
was very high.
too many annoying
Needless to
things,
say, Scolding
Alchemy
would
Pavilion
naturally
was
dissipate,
definitely built on
and he
top
wouldn't
of
take
a
it to
volcano.
volcano. But the
If his
foundation
guess was
building
correct,
pill was a big
this
deal
so-called
for him.
supporting
After
immortal
staying in a
island was
mulberry
probably
garden for
just a
so
volcanic
long,
island.
he actually
When he
didn't
thought
know
of
that the
this,
foundation
he jumped
building
in
pill
fright.
was going to be
Oh my
distributed.
God. Volcanoes
Looking at
were
Ferran,
no
who was
laughing
attentively
matter.
fertilizing
There was no
the
scientific
spiritual
warning
herbs
system
in
He
this
really
era.
couldn't feel
If
happy.
one were to erupt,
Marshall
everyone would be
Ferran.
finished.
Isn't the
Looking at the
foundation
lava
building
below,
pill
distributed
it was still
once
relatively
every
calm.
3 years.
Clearly,
There
Yu
wasn't any
asked
explosive
expressionlessly.
However,
Ferran
this thing
held
was
a
really
short
hard to
manure
explain.
ladle. It seemed that after successfully building his foundation,
this year
he would
seems
have
to
to
be the
leave
third
as
year.
soon as possible.
Yu
He did not be
speechless.
poked into the sky
Asking
by
her
a
was
volcano
also a
one
waste
day.
of time.
At the
Her
end of the
world
stone
seemed to
bridge
have
was a
no
large
other
stone
things.
room.
It was
From the
too
chisel
pure
marks
and
around it,
simple. It was
But
obvious
thinking about it,
that it had been
what
excavated
Qin
by
Chao
humans.
and Lu Lu
In the middle of
said
the
should
room
be true.
was a large
Would he have a
pit
chance to
that
build
sunk
his
into the
foundation
ground.
soon?
At the
Would
eye
he
of
be
the
able to
pit
build
was
his
a
foundation
large copper furnace
successfully?
that was roughly
Regardless
as
of
tall
whether
as a
he could
person.
succeed or
Smoke
not,
was rising
having a
from the top
chance
of
was
the
better
furnace,
than not having
and he
a
could
chance.
smell the fragrance
Unfortunately,
of medicinal
there was
pills.
only one
A faint
foundation
flame
building
was
pill each time.
emitted from the bottom of the
Xiaodian,
furnace,
Guan Yu,
illuminating
Qin Feng,
the
I'm
ground
sorry.
red.
Don't
Immediately,
worry. This boss
a
will
thought
definitely
emerged
do what
in
he
Yu
promised you.
Chincho's mind.
Thinking of
This was
this,
alchemy.
Yu Chincho's
Using the
depression
volcanoes
that had accumulated for
fire
more than a
refine
year
pills
was
was a
swept
good
away.
idea.
He
Not
faintly
only was
became
the fire
excited,
huge,
and his work
but there was
speed
also no
clearly a
need
lot
to use
faster.
firewood.
He
It was
urged
no
no
wonder
wonder
that
that someone
Alchemy
asked
Pavilion
when the
was built on
foundation
top
building
of a
pill
volcano
would be distributed.
According to the records
After
on the
finishing
Jade
his work,
archive,
he threw the
three
things
true
for
flames were the
deal with.
first to be used.
He wandered
in
around the
alchemy.
mulberry garden.
However, wanted
this
to
was
get
only a
close to
legend.
people.
Next
and
was the
ask
native
about
true
them when he
flames.
saw them.
Only
But the
those with
attitude of the people
extremely
here
high
was similar to
cultivations
Qin Chao
possessed them.
and Lu Lu.
However, he had no
Using them
choice
to
but to
refine
leave
pills
the mulberry
consumed
garden.
a lot of
In the end,
vitality.
he
Next was
the
the
only
heavenly
man who
flames.
carried manure.
He
in
didn't know
one
what a
garden
heavenly flame
was too
was,
famous,
but he knew that
no matter who
earthly
he
fire
found,
referred to a
they were
volcano's
afraid of
fire.
him.
Lastly,
He was almost
the
beaten
ordinary
by
firewood.
beautiful women.
Why did Ma
several
Jiugu bring me
times.
here?
Yu Chincho couldn't
Don't
figure
you
out.
know that
The
disciples
three of
who
them
haven't
walked down
reached
the
the
foundation
stairs
building
to the bottom of the
stage
pit
are not allowed
Yu
to
Chincho
wander
suddenly
around
felt
the
a
garden.
little
A
unbearable.
middle-aged woman.
The temperature
at the
was
entrance
too
of
high.
Wanfen Garden
Even with his
stopped him.
cultivation,
Martial
it seemed like he
ancestor,
couldn't handle
I
it.
was originally
To be
a
exact,
disciple on loan
it was a little
from the
scalding.
Alchemy Pavilion. I have to go
After
back
a while,
to the Alchemy
seeing that Ma
Pavilion to do
Jiugu
something.
still
It
didn't
won't be
say
long
anything.
before I return.
He had the
Yu
urge to run
Chincho
away.
saw that he
If
really
he stayed
couldn't
any
ask
longer,
anything
he would
in
be
Wanfen
roasted
Garden.
into human jerky.
So he wanted to go back
We
to the
still lack
Alchemy
an
Pavilion
assistant
to ask
Are
Ling
you willing to
Feng
come?
and the others.
Ma Jiugu,
No,
who was
the
standing
lady
in front of the
refused
furnace,
without hesitation.
finally spoke.
Grandmaster,
Yu Chincho seemed
then
to
do
be
you
in a
know when the
daze from the
foundation
roasting
building
and
dawned
felt a
for
little
us
drowsy.
chi
His
condensation
ears were
cycles
ringing,
will be
and he
distributed?
couldn't hear what
I
she
don't know.
said at all.
Yu Chincho,
Ma Jiugu
don't
was
come any
startled.
closer.
She turned
Go
around
back
and saw
or
his
else don't
situation.
blame me for being
She
rude.
immediately
The
shouted,
middle-aged woman
"Why
pulled
aren't
out
you
the sword in her
circulating
hand
your
and
cultivation
shouted
to
at Yu
resist?
Chincho.
Do you want
with
to
a
die
disgusted
with your
expression.
cultivation?"
Yin
His face
Zixia was
twitched,
thinking about the
and he
meaning
showed
of her
signs of anger.
great-grandmother's
But when he
words.
saw the shining
She turned
long
around
sword in front of him,
also saw
he
that
knew
a
that a wise
situation was not
man
good.
knew better
She
than
showed
to
a trace
fight
of
when the odds
anxiety.
were against him.
Shocked by
He
Ma
could only
Jiugu's
grit his
shout,
teeth
Yu
and
Chincho
retreat.
woke up.
Unable
He
to ask
circulated
about
his
the
Jinqi
foundation building
and did his
pill,
best
he
to
ran into a
disperse the
wall
heat
everywhere
in his body
and suffered
His
a
somewhat
belly full of
sluggish
anger.
and red
Yu
eyes
Chincho
became
went to the
lively
riverside
again,
alone,
but he
and
still
decided
felt
to
hot.
fish to relieve
He
his
thought to
boredom.
himself. He took out the
This is
fishing
more
gear
enjoyable
he made from
than
under a
sound.
rock.
Seeing
But
that he was
strangely,
awake,
it seemed
Ma
that his
Jiugu
bad
repeated
mood
her words.
also affected the
"We
mood
still
of
lack
the
an
fish
assistant.
in the river. Are you willing
Not
to
a
come?
single fish took the bait.
I'm willing. As a result,
Of course I'm willing.
The more he fished,
This was his dream.
the angrier he
How could he
became.
not be willing?
He retracted
At
the
least it was
fishing
better
rod
than carrying
and threw
dung
it back
all day long.
Hibiscus
After a
said
moment
that
of
this
joy,
river leads
he
to the
frowned
sea.
and said,
"Since there are
I'm
people
afraid that
guarding
Elder
Wanfen
Fei won't
Garden,
agree.
there
You
shouldn't
don't
be
have to
anyone
worry about
stopping me
Ferdinand.
from going to the
Ma
seaside."
Jiugu
right?
looked at the furnace
Yu
that was getting
Chincho
more
muttered
and
as he
more
looked at the
fragrant
river
and
that
said,
stretched between
"This
the mountains.
furnace is done." Unknowingly, she tapped the top of the direction with her walking stick, and after walking along the weeds by the river
rich
for more than
fragrance
2 hours,
spread
the river
in
in front of him
directions.
passed through
Dozens
two
of
dark
black
shadows came out of He the could already
furnace.
smell the salty smell in the air.
gently waved her
Yuchincho
sleeve
thought
and
to
absorbed
himself,
the black shadows.
I'm afraid I'm already
She then
at the
put them into
mouth
the
of
storage
sea.
pouch on her
Sure
waist.
enough,
His
when he
crutch
reached
tapped
the mountains,
ground again,
he could already
producing
hear
a
the
metallic
sound of waves,
the
beating
bottom of the
against
pill
shore,
furnace darkened,
mixed with the cries
and in an
of
instant,
seabirds.
there was no more
He quickened his
flame.
pace.
Yuchincho
and
could
passed through
feel the
mountains,
temperature
his
slowly
eyes
dropping.
suddenly opened up.
He couldn't help
The
but
river
feel
rushed to its
surprised.
end.
There must
the
be
sea.
some kind of
The
mechanism
blue sea was
installed
surging,
below.
and
It
the
was
white
really a
sandy
good place
beach was
for alchemy.
smooth and clean as the waves
turned
rose
around
fell.
and said
a flock
to
of
Yen
seagulls
Zixia,
flew
"He
between
will be
the
your
sea
assistant in
and
the
the
future."
sky.
Then she
and the
staggered
two
up the
barren
stairs.
mountains behind him
Yen
seemed to
Zixia
be
was
where they
stunned
built their
and
nests.
blushed.
He hadn't
She
seen
understood
the sea
that
for
her
a long
great-grandmother
The endless
might have
sea
heard her
was
words
so wide
and wanted to help
The
her.
scenery in front
She
of
stole a
him
glance
made Yu
at
Qianqiu feel refreshed.
The latter looked at Ma
and all his
Jugu
troubles
and
were
sighed
forgotten.
inwardly.
Ayo,
If he didn't know
Ayo,
better,
Yu
he wouldn't
Qianqiu
know that
took
this
off his
person
shoes
who
and
couldn't even
socks
walk
and
steadily
rushed
was
forward
actually a
barefoot,
late-stage
leaving a row of
tribulation
footprints on the
cultivator.
flat beach.
Suddenly,
His cries
Ma
immediately
Jugu turned around
startled
and
a
asked,
flock of
"Boy,
seagulls on the rocks
I want to ask you
behind him.
something."
And they
What's
also
the name of the song
echoed
you were
his
shouting
cries.
outside?
Yu Qianqiu waved his
scratched
fist
his
at
head
them
in
flying in the
embarrassment
air and
said,
laughed loudly.
"I just sang it
However,
casually."
he didn't
Let's
notice
call it Ocean's
that a person
laugh.
walked out of a cliff cave
Ma
behind
Jugu
him
turned
and was
around
staring at him.
and shook her head.
It was none other
Laugh,
than
laugh.
Yan Zixia, whom he hadn't seen
I'm old
for
and
more
can't
than a
laugh
year.
anymore.
Like a child,
I'll leave it to you young
Yu
people.
Qianqiu,
Alas, it's
who
good
was
to be
happily
young.
playing
After
at the
watching the
seaside,
old woman leave,
only stopped
Yu
after a long
Qianqiu
time.
nodded and
He stared at the
bowed to
vast
Yan
sea
Zixia.
and opened
Martial
his arms
ant
as if he wanted to
Yan
embrace
Zixia
the
chuckled at
entire
his flattering
sea.
appearance suddenly
and thought
he
that this
shouted,
person's
"This
acting
scene,
was quite
this
good.
scene,
He was
should
already
be sung to
exposed,
express
so why was
our
he
will."
still pretending?
With a somersault,
She rolled her eyes
he
and
somersaulted
asked,
out of the
"Yu
seawater
Qianqiu,
and
I have a
landed on a
question
clean
for you.
beach.
Do you know
sitting
him?"
cross-legged.
Yu Qianqiu
With a wave
was
of his
puzzled,
hand,
but
he
he still
placed a
replied
7-string
respectfully
zither on
Martial
his knees.
ant, please ask.
Yu Qianqiu will tell you everything he knows.
Immediately.
That's
He
good.
let out an
Yan
unrestrained
Zixia
and
walked
unrestrained
gracefully
laugh.
and said
A familiar
slowly,
melody sung
in
by
recent
Ren
years,
Qianqi from his
two
previous
songs have
life
been sung
appeared
in
in
his
cultivation
mind.
world.
Just in line
One is
with
called
the current
White
situation,
Fox,
and
and the
mood.
other is called
Yan
Mandarin Duck
Zixia,
and Butterfly
who was
Tree.
on a cliff cave.
I heard that they were
stared at the person
composed by a
below
disciple
and murmured,
of Ong
"It's Yu
Kwang
Qianqiu."
Sung.
That
Is he going to
person's name
sing?
seems
I've
to be
seen
Yu
the secret
Qianqiu.
report from
Do you
100
know
Flowers
him?
Palace that the
Yu Qianqiu's
world-famous
expression
White Fox
changed,
and
but he
dream of Mandarin
immediately
ducks and
returned to
butterflies
normal.
were actually
He couldn't let
created
anyone
by
else
an
know about
unranked
this
disciple.
matter.
of
Otherwise,
Ong Kwang Sung.
Fuxian Island
That
would
person
treat him
seems to be
as a
called
spy
Yu
sent
Qianqiu.
by Ong
I've
Kwang
admired him
Sung,
for a long time,
which was one of the biggest
but it's a pity
taboos
that
in
I
the
can't
cultivation
meet him.
world.
I wonder
He
if
shook
this
his head
Yu
without
Qianqiu is the
hesitation
same Yu
and said,
Qianqiu.
"I don't know
I'll
him,
wait and see.
and I've never
After
heard
laughing,
those two songs."
Yu Qianqiu
I didn't
raised his
expect that there would be
hand and
someone
waved.
with the same name.
His
as
fingers
me.
made a sound.
I guess
on
Martial
the zither.
Ant must have seen
His
him before.
mood was
What does he look
surging.
like? And he
Of course I have.
unconsciously
Yan
used his
Zixia
shrewd
stared
cheek.
at him with
The
a
sound of the
playful
zither
smile
pierced
and
through the
said,
sound of
"Not
crashing
only have I
waves,
seen him,
but I've also
spread
talked
in all
to him.
directions.
I've also heard
His
him
10
play the
fingers had
guqin
already
and sing at the
skillfully
seaside.
plucked the
The strangest
strings
thing
of the zither.
is that he looks exactly
Dong,
like you.
Dong.
Yu Qianqiu's heart, the moving
was beating
prelude,
wildly.
gradually
Her words were
sounded.
too obvious.
Hearing this prelude,
She was obviously
Yan
talking about
Zixia's
him,
eyes were
but he had
already
never
a
seen
little
her
brighter. When he was in
Suddenly,
Ong Kwang Sung,
Yu Qianqiu
it was very
burst
likely
into
that she
another
was
wave
lying
of
to him.
laughter.
He said in
Accompanied by the
surprise,
sound of the
"Ah,
zither.
there is
He
actually
opened
someone
his
in this
mouth
world
and
who
sang
looks
loudly
so much like
towards
me.
the boundless
Not only do we
sea.
have the same name,
The blue sea
but we
laughs.
also look exactly
the surging
the same.
tides on both
Martial
sides.
ants, if there's a
Floating
chance,
and sinking
you must
with the
take me to
waves.
see him. He
Remembering
may be my
the present.
relative. The heavens
Yan
laughs,
Zixia was stunned.
one after another.
She almost said
The
that he
heavens
was
know
Ong
who
Kwang
wins
Sung's Yu
and who
Qianqiu.
loses. She didn't
The
expect
rivers
that she
and
had made it
mountains
so
laugh,
obvious.
the
But
distant
he still
misty
pretended
rain,
that he didn't
the
know.
waves
He
wash
was really
away the
thick-skinned.
mortal world.
After thinking for
How
a
many
while,
do you
she
know
understood.
in the secular
His
world?
disciple
The
was
cool
not
breeze
expelled from the
laughs,
sect,
actually
and he
provoking
secretly
loneliness.
joined another sect.
The lofty sentiments
Anyone would treat
still
him
remain
as a spy.
in the evening.
This was a
La, la, la,
taboo
la, la.
in the
The
cultivation
wild
world.
voice in the
He would
hoarse
lose his
voice,
life.
the wild,
She asked too
wild
rashly.
singing, the
Yan
lofty
Zixia didn't
sentiments
say
of the
anything
song,
more.
and the
She
laughter
said,
of the common people.
"If you don't know him,
facing the
then
sea,
forget it. Let's go
laughing
back
at
to the
world,
mulberry garden."
laughing at the common people, laughing at the sea, laughing at the
Chapter
world,
66.
laughing at the common
Both
people.
of them had their own
Everything
thoughts
was in this song,
and were silent.
This kind of
along the way.
lofty
Yu
and
Qianqiu
unrestrained
thought about
song
it carefully
was completely
and was
different
basically
from White
sure that
Fox
she already knew about
and
him.
Dream of
He didn't know
Mandarin
why the
Ducks and
grandmother and
Butterflies.
granddaughter
When
brought
Yan
him to this
Zixia
hour.
heard it,
He thought about
even as
all
a woman,
kinds of possibilities
her whole
and had a
body
headache.
trembled.
But he
Was
didn't
the person in
expect
front of
Yan
her
Zixia
that
to fall in
ordinary
love with
looking
him.
little
This man was
disciple
sometimes like
of the
this.
alchemy
He was
pavilion
too
that she
clever
had seen
and
before,
couldn't see
the
the
scene of
essence
seeing Yu
things.
Qianqiu
Maybe
for
the person
first time
involved was
emerged in her mind.
confused.
A trace
After
of a
saying
smile
those
appeared at
words,
the corner of
Yan
Yan
Zixia
Zixia's
regretted it to
mouth.
death.
Hundred
From Yu
Flowers
Qianqiu's
Palace's
secret
secret
report
report
said
said
that
cheerful tone, she could tell that he had already become estranged and is willing to hide. It was as if he was constantly on guard against her. The example in the report is very similar to this, but she was afraid that the more she explained, with such talent, the deeper he's actually willing to carry manure, and she could only slowly taste the bitterness in her mouth. Yu Qianqiu finally is a person with shocking talent who has seen through the affairs of the world. It turned out that she never went in and out of the mulberry garden's front door. Is there a second Yu Qianqiu with such talent? They came to the most mysterious house. I don't believe it. Mulberry garden. If Yu Qianqiu looking at the furnishings in the house, he would definitely hug her thigh. He couldn't see anything special. The whole house was made of wood. I really don't want to carry manure in the mulberry garden. The wood used to build the house. I really don't have a choice. Old trees. Big sister, but there was a smell that couldn't be described. In other words, it was spiritual energy. Ma Jiugu had returned long ago. She was lying on a rocking chair and chatting with Elder Lawn next to her. Elder Lawn was truly a beautiful and dignified young married woman. Her figure was truly indescribable. She was voluptuous, with a protruding front and a curvaceous back. Her skin was so delicate and white that it could be pinched with a pinch of water. Her face and temperament were also indescribable. In Yu Qianzhou's words, she was the best among young married women. Especially her body was always covered with a layer of light, which made people feel that she was a fairy. Such a beauty, but unfortunately, she was Ferdinand's wife. Elder Lawn turned her head and glanced at the two of them with a smile. She was slightly stunned. It seemed that she didn't expect Yu Qianzhou to come with Yan Zixia. She was a little surprised and said, "Xiao." Her eyes fell on Yu Qianzhou. Ma Jugu, who was sitting on a rocking chair, said, "Last Lawn, leave Yu Qianzhou to Xiao to assist him. There's no need for him to take care of the spiritual plants. Go and tell Ferdinand." "Jugu, it's fine as long as you agree. What else do you need to tell him?" Elder Lawn said. "Lawn girl, Wan Fin Yuan belongs to Ferdinand. The rules can't be ignored." "I know." Elder Lawn stood up and glanced at the two of them. He was startled to see Yan Zixia's blushing face. Then he realized something and looked at Yu Qianzhou with a smile. "Yu Qianzhou, you can move into the inner courtyard from now on. It's more convenient this way." As he spoke, he glanced at Yan Zixia, who was avoiding his gaze. "Move in?" An image of a disfigured face and a frail figure flashed through Yu Qianzhou's mind, and his heart clenched for no reason. He didn't understand the grandmother and granddaughter's intention. He felt that moving in might not be a good thing. He immediately refused. "Elder Lawn, I'm used to living with Uncle Furong. You don't need to trouble yourself. I'll live there." The three women all stared at him at the same time. "Furong?" Elder Lan's face sank. She said coldly, "What? You don't listen to me because of that ugly monster?" A wave of cold air that was visible to the naked eye assaulted Yu Qianzhou, forcing him to take a step back. He immediately felt a bone-chilling cold all over his body, causing him to shiver. "Lawn girl, Aunt Lawn." Yan Zixia stood in front of Elder Lawn. She couldn't help but shiver when she touched the white cold air. She said after the cold air went back, "Aunt Lawn, forget it. Don't force him. It's the same whether he lives outside or inside." Elder Lawn coldly snorted and turned her body to the side. She gave face to the grandmother and granddaughter. Seeing the awkward situation, Yan Zixia said to Yu Qianzhou, "You go back first. I'll find you if there's anything." Yu Qianzhou nodded and bowed to the three. When he walked past the well at the entrance of the courtyard, he couldn't help but shiver. He found that the cold air from the well was similar to Elder Lan's. He couldn't help but shake his head with a bitter smile. It wasn't worth it to offend an expert just because of a disagreement. After returning and seeing Furong, Yu Qianzhou had something he couldn't figure out. It wasn't just about today's matter. This Elder Lawn was all smiles to everyone in the mulberry garden except for Furong. As long as she saw Furong, her pretty face would immediately freeze. Furong also seemed to be very afraid of her. It was like a cat and a mouse. He told Furong about his transfer. There wasn't any surprise on her face. It was as if everything that happened to him was expected. Early in the morning, Yu Qianzhou still had to carry a pole and work. Furong said that since he had been transferred, he didn't need to do it anymore. Unfortunately, she couldn't change his mind, but he didn't have time to do the work of fertilizing. Yan Zixia came to find him. He looked at their living environment and saw that there was only a tattered curtain between their beds. He couldn't help but frown. After seeing Furong's appearance, he was silent for a while and didn't say anything. After working for Yan Zixia for a few days, he found that there was nothing to do. She didn't need his help at all. He was just accompanying her. He finally understood that Yan Zixia came to the volcano cave every day to learn alchemy. However, he also benefited from it. He had learned most of Yan Zixia's craftsmanship. The only thing he needed was some time of practice. If there was anything he didn't understand, as long as he asked, Yan Zixia would be happy to answer him. This was exactly what he dreamed of. He was happy to follow her every day. There was nothing to be unhappy about. Today, Mulberry Garden sent out notice. All aura refining disciples were to gather in the inner garden. The foundation-building pills were distributed to everyone. Yu Qianqiu happily ran to the inner garden. He stood in a row with 7 beautiful aura-refining beauties. The 8 of them couldn't hide their excitement. Opposite them, Yin Zixia and Ma Jugu stood under the eaves with the help of a walking stick. Both of them looked at Yu Qianqiu and smiled. Yu Qianqiu smiled happily. He had been looking forward to this day for several years. How could he not be happy? Elder Lan smiled amiably and said, "Today is a good day. Everyone, don't be excited. Wait a moment, the foundation-building pills will be delivered soon." The 8 of them bowed together and said, "Thank you for the Sect's help. Thank you, consecrated Jugu. Thank you, Elder Lan. If our cultivation is successful in the future, we will definitely work hard for the Sect." These are some old words. Everyone had memorized them before they came. But at this time, their gratitude was real, including Yu Qianqiu. In short, everyone laughed very happily. Everyone was very happy. Looking at this scene, Yu Qianqiu sighed. A big sect was really a big sect. How many disciples in Fuxian Island had not reached the foundation-building stage? It was definitely not a small number. The number of foundation-building pills they took out at once was not a small number. Back in the day, even a large sect like the Azure Light School would only be able to obtain a limited amount of Foundation Establishment Dawn through the New Excellence Assembly that was held once every 10 years. Moreover, not all of the disciples in the school had the opportunity to obtain one, and some disciples would not even have the luck to obtain one until they were old. How could it be like the supporting Immortal Island? It had its own spiritual herb garden and could refine pills. Furthermore, every 3 years, the entire island would be able to refine pills. This was strength. Sure enough, not long after, someone delivered the foundation-building pills. Fei Danan came with a box personally with a smile. The 8 of them bowed together and said, "Greetings, Elder Fei." Fei Danan walked to Elder Lan's side and waved. He said happily, "Today is a good day for everyone. No need to be so polite." He glanced at everyone with a smile. His gaze paused on Yu Qianqiu, and the latter smiled at him respectfully. Fei Danan was startled. He looked at Yu Qianqiu and then looked at the box in his hand. He could not smile anymore. Elder Lan, who was beside him, grabbed the box in his hand and rolled her eyes at him. She said coquettishly, "Why are you in a daze? The disciples have been waiting anxiously." Chapter 67. The 8 of them stared at the slowly opening wooden box in Elder Lan's hand and immediately smelled a fragrance. Their eyes couldn't help but show a look of anticipation. Elder Lan stretched out 2 slender fingers and smiled as she took out a foundation-building pill the size of a purple quail. She placed it under her nose and sniffed it. She looked at the crowd and said with a smile, "It smells so good." Everyone laughed along with him. Elder Lan put the foundation-building pill back into the box. Just as she was about to look up, she suddenly paused and looked into the box in disbelief. Then, she glanced at the 8 people standing opposite her with a look of confirmation. "Ferdinand, what's going on? Why are there only 7? Where's the last one? Did you eat it?" Elder Lan asked her husband unhappily as she held the box in her hands. For a moment, everyone who was in high spirits just now quietened down, especially the 8 disciples. They were even more anxious. What did one less mean? It meant that someone might not get it. When he saw Ferdinand's eyes looking at him, Yu Qianqiu's heart was beating fast. He thought to himself, "Oh no, that missing one isn't for me, right?" He was not the only one who was nervous. The other 7 female disciples were also very nervous. Indeed, I missed one person to the sect." Ferdinand smiled and pointed to someone and said, "I forgot about Yu Qianqiu." "What?" Yu Qianqiu cried out in surprise, and he instantly felt as if he'd been struck by lightning. His head buzzed, and his countenance instantly turned ghastly pale. He shook his head with great effort to stabilize himself. Elder Lan's face immediately turned cold. She said in a cold tone, "Ferdinand, what do you mean? You got the person from the elixir refining pavilion. What? You threw him to the mulberry garden and left them alone? Could it be that you looked down on our mulberry garden so much? The other 7 female disciples heaved a sigh of relief and looked at Yu Qianqiu with pity in their eyes. "Long girl, don't be anxious. Let Ferdinand explain clearly what's going on." Yin Zixiao walked over while supporting Ma Jiugu. The former saw that Yu Qianqiu's face did not look good and could not help but show a trace of worry on her face. Am I being wronged? He had personally delivered the medicine, which meant that he looked down on the mulberry garden. However, that brat was borrowed from the alchemy pavilion and is not considered a true disciple of my myriad fragrance garden. I forgot to report him. Right, the alchemy pavilion. Thinking up to here, Ferdinand suddenly came to a realization. He bowed to Ma Jiugu and said, "Jiugu, Bing Xue indeed misunderstood me. Think about it. Yu Qianqiu is actually a disciple of the alchemy pavilion. How can I report him under the name of Wanfen Garden? Don't worry. The alchemy pavilion definitely has him. Even if they don't, they can only blame themselves. Just let them refine another batch." "I see. Danan is right." Ma Jiugu nodded and said to Yu Qianqiu, "You don't have to worry. You will get what belongs to you." Yu Qianqiu also heaved a sigh of relief, but he still felt a little uneasy before he confirmed what he had obtained. He squeezed out a smile and said, "With you in charge, disciple is not in a hurry." "Bing Xue, you see, you misunderstood me," Ferdinand said in a wrong tone. Lan Bing Xue rolled her eyes at him and sneered. "Who told you not to make it clear?" After that, she held the box in her hand and distributed the fragrant building foundation pills to everyone. The disciples who received the pills were very excited and said, "Elder Xielon." Only Yu Qianqiu looked at her with a pitiful expression. Ma Jiugu couldn't stand it anymore. No matter how high her cultivation was, she was still from the qi refining stage. She could understand Yu Qianqiu's mood, not to mention that he was the husband she had decided for Xia. After the pills were distributed, she said to Ferdinand, "Danan, take Yu Qianqiu to the alchemy pavilion now. The sooner things are settled, the better." "Yes," Ferdinand responded and said to Yu Qianqiu with a smile, "Let's go find your master to settle the account." He grabbed him and flew away. Before Yu Qianqiu could react, in just a few breaths' time, the two of them had already arrived in front of the alchemy pavilion's main hall. Ferdinand shouted towards the inside, "Guan Weiwu, get out here." Scaring the disciples who were about to come over to salute, they took a detour. "Old Fei, did you eat arsenic? Why is your voice so loud?" Guan Weiwu came out with wide eyes. Ferdinand smiled and said, "Look who I brought for you, Master." Yu Qianqiu saluted with infinite sorrow. "Yu Qianqiu." Guan Weiwu was a little surprised and looked at Ferdinand. "You are willing to return my disciple to me." "Puffed. Return what?" "I came to ask you for building foundation pills." "Get lost." The refined building foundation pills were all given to the sect. "Where'd I get building foundation pills for you?" Guan Weiwu's voice was not small. "Yu Qianqiu is your disciple and also a disciple of your alchemy pavilion. If you don't give him building foundation pills, who will?" Ferdinand rolled his eyes. You want it?" Guan Weiwu looked at his disciple. Yu Qianqiu nodded pitifully. "Oh." Guan Weiwu patted his forehead and said, I forgot. You should have a building foundation pill." Then he said to a disciple who had just passed by, "Go and call Yin Shu for me." Hearing Yin Shu was called, Yu Qianqiu suddenly felt a little bad. Sure enough, after Yin Shu came, he saw Yu Qianqiu at a glance. The two of them had a feeling of enmity when they met. "Yin Shu, give me a building foundation pill," Guan Weiwu said. "Building foundation pill?" Yin Shu was a little confused and said, "Elder Guan, other than the sect's building foundation pills, the rest have been distributed. Where would I have a building foundation pill?" Guan Weiwu frowned and said, "Nonsense, where's Yu Qianqiu's? He should have one." Yin Shu looked at Yu Qianqiu and immediately understood what was going on. He was secretly happy. In fact, when Fuxian Island reported disciples who needed building foundation pills, the alchemy pavilion was the one who reported it to Yin Shu. At that time, he thought of Yu Qianqiu. The latter was borrowed by Wanfen Garden. Should the alchemy pavilion report it? Because the two of them had a grudge, He had the idea of using public office to take revenge. He decided not to report it to Yu Qianqiu. If Wanfeng reported it, it would be fine. If not, then Yu Qianqiu was unlucky. Anyway, he had a reason, so he could not be blamed. He did not expect such a thing to really happen. Elder at that time, Yu Qianqiu had already been transferred away. It should have been reported by the place where he was, so we did not report it here. Naturally, there was no building foundation pill for him. Now, how could this disciple take out the building foundation pill? Yin Shu said helplessly. Yu Qianqiu was a little dizzy. Both sides had actually forgotten about him. He was afraid that Yin Shu had done it deliberately. Ferdinand glanced at Yin Shu coldly and snorted. Nonsense. My own disciple still needs others to report it. If I say it to others, they will think that I am Yu Qianqiu's master. Guan Weiwu scratched his messy hair. In his opinion, both sides were reasonable. In fact, it was a misunderstanding. He could not help but say, "What should I do? I can't do anything about it." Ferdinand sneered. Hee, you can't do anything about it. You can talk to Jiugu yourself. Yu Qianqiu was personally ordered by Jiugu to bring him to you. I can't stand it when she gets angry. Don't blame me for dragging you down with me. It's Jiugu. Guan Weiwu's face twitched. Obviously, he was very afraid of Ma Jiugu. So, he said to Ferdinand in a negotiating tone, "Why don't you take some spirit grass from the 10,000 fragrance garden to refine the building foundation pill, and I will refine it again." Fart, the 10,000 fragrance garden only has a few spirit grass to refine the building foundation pill. Especially the main ingredients, they are very difficult to grow. Do you think the spirit grass is like chives? After a few days of cutting, you can grow another batch? Ferdinand said in a bad mood. This is a big problem. Guan Weiwu's face was full of worry. His eyes glanced at Yin Shu on the side, and he suddenly said angrily, "It's all your fault for not being reliable. I punish you to immediately think of a way. Otherwise, your alchemy pavilion decomposition will be handed over to someone else." Chapter 68. Yin Shu, who was secretly laughing at the side, was stunned by the scolding. Originally, he could hide on the side and watch the fun after taking revenge. Who knew that Guan Weiwu's way of thinking was not reasonable at all? He actually vented his anger on him. However, his brain was really good. After a little hesitation, he thought of a way and said, "The refined elixirs are distributed to the disciples on the island, and the rest are kept by the faction. If the two elders find the head and explain the situation, I think the head will definitely make an exception." Yes, Guan Weiwu nodded. Ferdinand also agreed. "Then let's go. What are we waiting for? Let's go." Guan Weiwu took the lead and flew away. "You go with us." Ferdinand grabbed Yu Qianqiu and flew away. Yin Shu looked at the three people flying away and smiled evilly. Yesterday, he learned from his father that the few remaining Foundation establishment elixirs in the faction had been given out as a favor. Before flying away, Yu Qianqiu subconsciously turned his head to look at Yin Shu. He could clearly see the smile on Yin Shu's face as if his scheme had succeeded. He couldn't help but feel his heart skip a beat. If he hadn't guessed wrong, this trip would have been in vain. "Yin Shu, if I still can't get the Foundation establishment elixir this time, this matter must be related to you. If you dare to ruin my big plan, I swear to kill you." Yu Qianqiu's heart was filled with killing intent. Even Ferdinand, who was holding him and flying, was shocked. With his cultivation and being so close to Yu Qianqiu, he could naturally feel the strong, killing intent of the person in his hand. It was not the kind of resentment of ordinary people, but the kind of iron-blooded ruthlessness of holding the power of life and death and deciding the life and death of others. He could not help but look at him a few more times. He thought to himself that an ordinary disciple in the Qi refinement stage could make Aunt Zhou pay so much attention to him. This kid's origin was probably not ordinary. When the two landed in front of the Penglai Pavilion, Guan Weiwu had already entered. Looking at Yu Qianqiu, who looked pitiful at first but now had an ice-cold expression, Ferdinand asked, "Yu Qianqiu, what happened to you?" "I'm afraid we've come here for nothing again," Yu Qianqiu said expressionlessly as he raised his head and looked at the room on the third floor. Ferdinand smiled and said, "You worry too much. The sect will always keep a few elixirs in reserve every time. Since Elder Guan and I came together, the sect leader will still give us some face. I hope it's not Yin Shu's doing." Yu Qianzhou's eyes narrowed as a cold light flashed through them. "Yin Shu?" Ferdinand was taken aback and asked doubtfully, "Are you saying that Yin Shu, the son of Elder Yin Ta, is playing tricks just now?" Yu Qianzhou nodded and said, "I have a grudge with this person. The alchemy pavilion doesn't have my Zhuji Dan. I'm afraid he did it on purpose." He suddenly raised his hand and pointed at the Penlai pavilion and sneered, "I hope I'm wrong." Ferdinand looked thoughtfully at Yu Qianzhou, whose temperament was completely different from before. "Old Fei, why don't you come up? What are you doing downstairs? Come up." Guan Weiwu poked his head out from the window on the second floor. "Let's go. We'll talk after we see the sect leader," Ferdinand said. Yu Qianzhou nodded and did not say anything. Penlai Pavilion was still the same. Yu Qianzhou used to dream of getting an office here one day. Those who could have a room here were all at the level of an elder. Penlai Pavilion still looked the same as the government office building in his previous life. But now he was not in the mood. When the three of them came to the sect leader's room, Guan Weiwu shouted, "Is the sect leader in? Come in." The sect leader's majestic voice came from inside. Guan Weiwu pushed the door open. The three of them walked in and greeted first, sect leader. When the sect leader Feng Xiangtian saw it was Elder Guan and Elder Fei, he nodded and smiled. When he saw Yu Qianzhou behind the two of them, he could not help but be stunned. This Yu Qianzhou left a deep impression on him. He had almost brought him a lot of trouble. He had also heard about the matter of Yu Qianzhou being seconded by Ferdinand to Wanfen Garden to raise spear herbs, but he did not take it to heart. Now that this group came, could it be that something had happened? "What are you guys doing?" Feng Xiangtian asked doubtfully. Guan Weiwu was the first to speak. He explained everything in detail, and then said, "Sect leader, just give me a foundation building, Dan." Feng Xiangtian looked at the three of them and finally landed on Yu Qianzhou. He said, "No, it's useless to look for me." Ferdinand looked at Yu Qianzhou in surprise, thinking that Yu Qianzhou had guessed correctly, but he still asked, "Aren't there more Zhuji elixirs?" "No." Feng Xiangtian shook his head. "Senior brother, you can't be so stingy, right?" Guan Weiwu glared and said angrily, "If we were outside, even my disciples would have to call you martial uncle. You can't even bear to give a foundation establishment pill. My father even passed the position of sect leader to you. You don't even give me this little face." Bullsh *T. Feng Xiangtian was furious when he heard this. He pointed his finger and scolded, "What does this have to do with Master passing me the position of sect leader? How dare you say such words? Your silly master can even forget his own disciples' foundation establishment pill. How dare you come here to make a scene? If it was someone else, I would have thrown him out long ago. There's no foundation establishment pill. If you're not convinced, you can follow me to Heavenheart Pavilion to argue with Master. Let's see how Master will deal with you." Hearing that they were going to Heavenheart Pavilion, Guan Weiwu's anger was immediately extinguished and he was speechless. Yu Qianzhou now knew that the previous sect leader was the current sect leader's master. Moreover, he was Guan Weiwu's father. In that case, he did not choose the wrong master. He was actually from the same lineage as the sect leader. Seeing that the gang leader of Fushin Island was angry, he wanted to say a few words to explain for Master. However, the level here was too high, and it was not his place to interrupt. "Sect leader, don't blame old Guan. This matter was ordered by Ninth Ant. We are really afraid that we can't explain it to Ninth Ant when we go back. Please help us think of a way." Ferdinand smiled bitterly. Feng Xiangtian was stunned and said in surprise, "Why does this matter involve Ninth Ant? Why would she?" He glanced at Yu Qianzhou and did not finish his words. However, everyone could hear the meaning in his words. The sect leader's recuperation prevented him from finishing his words in front of the younger disciples. Ferdinand shook his head and said, "I don't know. Sect leader, if there are more foundation-building elixirs, just give one. It's not a big deal." In the eyes of these tribulation cultivators, the foundation-building elixir was naturally not a good thing. It was not even a tonic. Feng Xiangtian glanced at Guan Weiwu, who was standing on the side without saying anything. He stood up slowly and said, "It's not that we don't want to give it to you. It's just that you were a day late. Yesterday, we received a Jade archive letter from the Moon Clan leader, Qianghua Fairy. She said that she urgently needed a batch of foundation-building elixirs and asked for Fuxian Island's help. You also know that the Moon Clan and Fuxian Island have always been on good terms. Moreover, Qianghua Fairy personally asked for it. Naturally, Fuxian Island has to help. I have already asked Elder Qin to personally send the remaining 20 foundation-building elixirs on the island to the Moon Clan. How do you expect me to take out more foundation-building elixirs now?" Cabbages, yellow in the fields, lost their mother at the age of 3 or 2. There was no need to mention how bitter Yu Qianzhou's heart was. Tears flowed uncontrollably from his stomach. His life was even more bitter than that of Cabbage. Although Yin Shu was unavoidable in this matter, he could not control the Moon Clan. They were the third largest sect in the cultivation world. How could a disciple in the last stage of the core formation realm influence them? How could such a coincidence happen to him? If this was not a bitter life, what was? Chapter 69. It was such a coincidence. Ferdinand and Guan Weiwu looked at each other, then looked at the dejected Yu Qianzhou and felt that he was a poor child. "Elder Ferdinand, can you refine another batch of foundation establishment pills with the spiritual herbs of your Wanfen garden?" Feng Xiangtian asked. Guan Weiwu had asked the same question, but Ferdinand shook his head and said, "There are a few, and there are still a few main ingredients that are not mature yet. They can't be used to refine pills at all. I'm afraid we still need to wait for another 2 years." Feng Xiangtian nodded and said, "Then there's no other way, but we didn't do a good job on this matter. You two elders are also responsible. Some things can't let the disciples be wronged. We still have to compensate them. How about this? Yu Qianzhou, what do you think about this?" Feng Xiangtian pondered and said, "In the next 3 years, when the foundation establishment pills are distributed, in addition to the foundation establishment pill you deserve, you will get 1 more, and then 1 more as compensation. I will give you 3 pills at a time. If you still can't build the foundation, it won't affect you getting 2 more chances in the future. What do you think?" The 2 elders nodded in agreement to the sect leader's words. This deal was worth it. It meant that other people had 3 chances to reach the foundation establishment stage. Because Yu Qianzhou had effected his first attempt, he had obtained 5 chances. Basically, it could be said that his chances of reaching the foundation establishment stage were certain. "I can get a total of 5 foundation establishment pills?" Yu Qianzhou was stunned. It was good, but it was a pity to waste 3 years. These old guys had no concept of time. It couldn't be helped. They were people who lived for hundreds of years. In their eyes, 2 or 3 years was really nothing. However, things were already like this. The head had also made compensation. If he still didn't agree, it would be a bit too much. He could only salute and said, "Thank you, head. Okay, let's do it this way." Feng Xiangtian said and looked at the 3 people and asked, "Is there anything else?" Since it was like this, the 3 people had nothing else to say. They naturally saluted and left. After leaving the Penglai Pavilion, Guan Weiwu, who had been silent for a long time, asked, "Yu Qianzhou, are you willing to return to the elixir refining pavilion with me?" After such a thing happened, Yu Qianzhou felt a little sad and replied, "I will listen to Master's arrangements." Just as Guan Weiwu was about to speak, he heard Ferdinand say, "Go back? Yu Qianzhou's matter is something neither you nor I can decide. Old Guan, if you want someone, you should talk to Jiugu yourself. Otherwise, if Jiugu sees me going back alone, the Slayer wand in her hand is not something to be trifled with. You won't be able to escape." Guan Weiwu was stunned. He looked at Yu Qianzhou and said, "Then you should go back to the Mulberry Garden first. We'll talk about the matter of returning to the Alchemy Pavilion in the future. Don't worry, I'll remember everything." "Got it, Master." Yu Qianzhou nodded. "Old Guan, I have to take Yu Qianzhou back to report to Jiugu." After Ferdinand finished speaking, he grabbed Yu Qianzhou and flew away. In a few moments, the 2 returned to the outside of the Mulberry Garden. Ferdinand dared to fly out with Yu Qianqiu, but he did not dare to fly in without permission. If he did that, it would be disrespectful to Ma Jiugu. The two of them walked back obediently. When he saw the old man, Ferdinand reported everything that had happened in full detail. After listening, Ma Jiugu looked at Yu Qianqiu, who had his head down, and then looked at Yan Zixia, who was staring at him with pity. She sighed and said, 3 years is not long for you young people, but for us old guys, it's not short. But for us old fellows, it's not a short time. I don't know how many more 3 years I can live. Elder Lan, who was accompanying her, said with a smile, Jiugu, you must be joking. With your profound cultivation, sooner or later you will step into the spirit-severing stage. At that time, it won't be a problem for you to live for thousands of years. Bing Xue is right. It's only a matter of time before you break through to the tribulation passing stage. Ferdinand also smiled and flattered. Ma Jiugu shook her head and said, the Great Way is ruthless. It's really rare for someone to step into the spirit-severing stage in the cultivation world. I know you're saying good things, but I've lived for more than 500 years and I know my own situation. I don't have any extravagant hopes. I just hope that the younger generation can have that day. After saying that, she looked at Yan Zixia and Yu Qianqiu kindly. From the old woman's words, if she couldn't make a breakthrough in her cultivation, she was afraid that she would not be far from death. Yu Qianqiu looked up and wanted to comfort her by saying that she would live for a long time. However, when he thought that she had already lived for a long time, he couldn't say it. There was a short silence in the hall. It's all Ferdinand's fault. Otherwise, our Yu Qianqiu might be able to reach the foundation building stage today. Lan Bingxue complained to Ferdinand. Yu Qianqiu had also become Yu Qianqiu. Obviously, he knew what the old woman meant and treated him as one of their own. Ferdinand wanted to explain, but he was speechless when he saw the old woman. All right, you can't blame Ferdinand for this. You have a lot of things to do. Go back and do your own thing. Ma Jiugu said. Ferdinand thought that it would be awkward to stay here. After bowing to Ma Jiugu, he patted Yu Qianqiu's shoulder to comfort him and left. To be honest, after this incident, Yu Qianqiu didn't know why the people in the mulberry garden valued him so much, but he felt everyone's kindness. Although there was still a bit of self-protection in his subconscious, he finally felt a little bit of humanity in the mulberry garden. Yu Qianqiu, you have suffered a lot. Now, you have to wait for the next 3 years. Ma Jiugu said regretfully. It's a pity that the spirit herbs in the mulberry garden are not mature yet. Otherwise, I will personally refine a furnace of foundation building pills to help you break through to the foundation building stage in one fell swoop. Suffering a lot? Not at all. People are animals with feelings. It was enough to hear the old woman's words. But he couldn't afford to wait. Ong Kwangsung and Chu Ping-er, who had been waiting for his arrival with great longing. Although he had never said it to anyone, it was a solemn promise a man made to a woman. It was a promise to a woman who treated him sincerely. It was a promise he didn't dare to break. It was not about whether he was a cultivator or whether he loved her or not. If he was a real man, he must fulfill his promise to that woman. This road was full of difficulties, but he must move forward bravely. He, Yu Qianqiu, dared to betray heaven and earth, but he didn't dare to betray someone who was sincere to him, especially a woman who was sincere to him. Otherwise, he would feel like there was a thorn in his back for the rest of his life. He wouldn't be able to eat or sleep well, and he wouldn't be able to rest in peace for the rest of his life. In his previous life, he was able to rise from a nameless nobody to a famous underworld boss. This was all because of his loyalty and commitment. This creed had been deeply ingrained in his bones and soul. This was the foundation that he absolutely did not dare to abandon. Otherwise, he would lose the meaning of living. It would be the same in this life. This was his fate. It was his, Yu Qianqiu's life. How could he fulfill his promise with his current cultivation? A year had passed, and now he had to wait for another 3 years? Even if he waited for a moment, it meant that Chu Ping had to wait for him for a moment, let alone waiting for another 3 years. His heart was uneasy, and it was difficult for others to understand his heart. He suffered silently. There were some things that needed to be said. In the main hall, Yu Qianqiu suddenly knelt down in front of Ma Jiugu. "Ah!" Yan Zixia and Lan Bingxiu exclaimed. Ma Jiugu, who was leaning on her walking stick, suddenly opened her drooping eyelids and said solemnly, "Yu Qianqiu, why are you doing this?" Chapter 70. There is a saying that men have gold under their knees, and they should not kneel lightly. In his previous life, he had never knelt before anyone. He had only knelt and cried in front of his deceased parents. In this life, he had only knelt before his master. So what if he knelt again for a promise? Not to mention that the old lady was old enough to be his ancestor, so there was nothing wrong with kneeling. Yu Qianqiu shook his head and said with a bitter smile, "Disciple requests a favor from Jiugu. This matter is really difficult to speak of, so I have no choice but to kneel down and beg." Ma Jiugu's opened eyelids drooped again. She walked several steps with the help of her crutch. She stared at him and asked, "What is it that makes you kneel down and beg?" The other two women also stared at him. "Damn it, do you think I like kneeling?" Yu Qianqiu thought for a while and said, "I want to ask Jiugu for some spiritual herb seeds needed to concoct the foundation-building elixir." Yan Zixia and Lan Bingxiu were stunned. Both of them thought they had heard it wrong. It was understandable if he wanted foundation-building pills, but if he wanted seeds, could it be that he wanted to plant his own spiritual herbs and concoct pills? There's no need for that. If he waited for more than 3 years, he would be able to obtain 3 foundation establishment pills in one go. Naturally, Ma Jiugu had also thought of the same thing. In fact, she had thought even more than them. "Stand up and talk first," Ma Jiugu asked. "Do you want to keep the seed or give it to someone else?" She thought that maybe Yu Qianqiu was sent by another sect. Yan Zixia was slightly surprised. She had also thought of this possibility. She knew that Yu Qianqiu was from Ongquangsong, who liked to kneel. No one was born to be a slave. Yu Qianqiu stood up and said, "This disciple wants it for himself." Ma Jiugu asked indifferently, "Grow your own spiritual herbs?" "Yes." "You want to concoct a foundation-building pill yourself?" "Yes." "Refine it for your own use?" "Yes." This old woman doesn't understand. You can obviously get 3 foundation establishment pills in 3 years, so why did you do this? Ma Jiugu turned around and asked, "Can you tell me why?" Yu Qianqiu hesitated for a moment, then said resolutely, "I promise. For a promise, otherwise I can wait 3 years." "I still don't understand. You have stayed in the mulberry garden for a long time. You should know that it is very difficult to grow the several main ingredients of the building foundation pill. Even if you can grow it, even if I give you seeds, you won't be able to grow it in 3 years. If that's the case, you might as well wait another 3 years. I don't know if I'm muddle-headed, but I can't calculate this debt clearly. Yu Qianqiu, can you give me an explanation?" Ma Jiugu gently poked the ground with her walking stick. Yu Qianqiu paused, then shook his head and said, "This disciple can't explain it clearly." Naturally, he couldn't tell her the secret of the golden pearl. "Oh," Ma Jiugu replied, and walked a few steps with the help of her crutch. She stopped and said, "You know the rules of Fuxian Island. Spirit grasses and seeds are not allowed to be spread to outsiders." Yu Qianqiu also knew the rules. While he was feeling dejected, Ma Jiugu said, "Speaking of which, you are also a disciple of Fuxian Island. Giving the seeds to you is not considered spreading them to outsiders. Giving the seeds to a disciple to grow privately is not something that has been done, but I can give it to you." Yu Qianqiu was stunned, and so were Yan Zixia and Lan Bingxiu. "The condition is that you can't spread the seeds of Fuxian Island to outsiders. If you don't abide by this rule, I will never give you the seeds," Ma Jiugu said with her back facing him. Yu Qianqiu was overjoyed and quickly said, "This disciple will absolutely not give the seeds to anyone." He didn't expect that Ma Jiugu would agree. "Good. You must remember what you said today. If you dare to violate it, not only will I be breaking the rules, but you will also be breaking the rules. At that time, even if you run to the ends of the earth, I will still crush your bones and scatter your ashes. Do you believe me?" Ma Jiugu was old, but her indifferent words were filled with unquestionable confidence. With Ma Jiugu's cultivation level, Yu Qianqiu certainly believed that she had the strength to kill someone else. However, he had the golden bead, and the white fox, who was also in the late stage of passing tribulation, was also in the golden bead. No matter how confident she was, it was useless. However, it was completely unnecessary. Yu Qianqiu never thought of giving the seeds to others, so he immediately said cautiously, "This disciple, Yu Qianqiu, swears to the heavens that I will absolutely not give the seeds to anyone, or I will die a horrible death." In the cultivation world, oaths were the most taboo. What cultivators did was originally in defiance of the heavens, and if they violated an oath, they would often have to obey an oath. This was not a joke. Don't agree too early. I still have something that I need you to agree to before I will give you the seeds. Ma Jiugu turned around and stared at him with a smile. There is still a condition? Yu Qianqiu slightly frowned, but he still respectfully said, "Senior, please speak." Ma Jiugu looked at Yan Zixia and slowly said, "Since you are a person who attaches importance to promises, then this old woman wants a promise from you. As long as you agree to this old woman's promise, I will immediately give you the spiritual herb seeds." Promise? What promise? Yu Qianqiu was stunned. Yan Zixia and Lan Bingxue also looked at Ma Jiugu, not knowing what kind of promise she wanted. Ma Jiugu shook her head and said, "Promise this old woman first." Yu Qianqiu hesitated. How could he casually agree to this kind of thing? What if she asked him to die, or something that he couldn't do? How could he agree to it? Ma Jiugu knew that he had misgivings, so she smiled and said, "This old woman's promise is not difficult for you to fulfill, and it won't hurt you. Moreover, it will give you great benefits. Do you agree or not?" Yu Qianqiu didn't believe in such a thing, but he couldn't resist the temptation of the spiritual herb seeds, and timidly said, "If it's really as Venerable Ma Jiugu said, then disciple Yu Qianqiu will naturally agree. Senior, please speak." But in his heart, he added, "If it's something I can't do, then don't blame me for going back on my words." Ma Jiugu rarely laughed and said, "Good. Since you agree, I also believe that you are a person who keeps your promise. As for what the promise is, we can talk about it later. Perhaps there is no need to say it in the future. I will naturally tell you when the time comes. You just need to remember that you owe me a promise." Yan Zixia and Lan Bingxue looked at each other, not knowing what this old woman was talking about. On the other hand, Yu Qianqiu felt strange and felt that there was a big conspiracy waiting for him. Ma Jiugu was very happy, so she poked him with her walking stick and said, "Little Aslan, prepare 10 spiritual herb seeds for refining the foundation establishment pill and give them to him. Go now." Yes. Lan Bingxue went to get the seeds with a belly full of doubts. "Thank you, Venerable Ma Jiugu." Yu Qianqiu smiled awkwardly. Logically speaking, he should be happy after obtaining something he dreamed of. However, he couldn't bring himself to be happy. He didn't know if exchanging a promise for a spirit grass seed was a loss or a gain. For now, he could only take one step at a time. Not long after, Lan Bingxue came back with a small cloth bag and handed it to Yu Qianqiu. "Open it and see if it's what you want." Yu Qianqiu stuffed it into his storage bag without hesitation and said with a smile, "No need. How can it be wrong when Elder Lan personally took it? Disciple thanks Elder Lan." Lan Bingxue smiled and returned to Ma Jiugu's side. She and Yan Zixia were a bit confused. First of all, they didn't know why Yu Qianqiu wanted the seeds. Saying that he wanted to plant spiritual herbs didn't seem very credible. Moreover, Ma Jiugu's promise was also very confusing. After asking if there was nothing wrong, Yu Qianqiu left the inner garden. When he came out, he saw Hibiscus working. He didn't greet her and excitedly returned to the small house and disappeared. Chapter 71. Amidst the sea of flowers, 2 diligent gardeners were hard at work. The white fox, dressed in white, was strolling amidst the flowers not far away. From time to time, she would bend over and smell the alluring fragrance. Guan Yu and Chun Feng would steal glances at her from time to time. After all, Such a beautiful woman was rare. Not rare, but they had never seen one before. The two of them did not know that the white fox was a vixen. When the two of them first came here, they were quite conflicted. After a long time, they realized that accompanying such a beautiful woman and working in a sea of flowers every day was not necessarily a bad thing. There were no schemes, no disputes, and the two of them gradually got used to and began to enjoy life here. After spending a long time with the two of them, they became familiar with each other. The white fox also gradually began to talk to the two of them. Jing Jing walked to the two of them and saw that another piece of land had opened up. She looked around and suggested, "It's best if we can plant purple flowers here." "All right, we'll listen to Miss White." "Chen Feng, let's plant violet flowers here." Guan Yu laughed. Chen Feng agreed with a hum, then turned his head and asked, "Miss White, why haven't I seen Boss in a long time?" He was now full of admiration for Yu Qianqiu. He had never seen such a talented young man. "I don't know," the white fox replied softly. She looked at the empty bamboo house in the distant forest, and a trace of disappointment appeared in her eyes. "What's wrong? Does everyone miss me?" "Huh?" Yu Qianqiu suddenly appeared behind everyone and laughed. Guan Yu laughed as well. "Speak of the devil." This was a saying he realized when he listened to Yu Qianqiu talk about the three kingdoms. "Let's not talk about anything else. Yinchang, Chen Feng, don't plant these flowers in the future. I have something important for you to do." Yu Qianqiu laughed. Guan Yu and Chen Feng looked at the white fox suspiciously. Seeing that the latter did not object, Guan Yu asked, "What is it?" "Huh?" Yu Qianqiu suddenly threw his head back and laughed. Everyone looked at each other, not knowing why he was so happy. However, the white fox seemed to hear a tinge of sadness in his laughter and looked at him quietly. After venting his anger through laughter, Yu Qianqiu patted Guan Yu's shoulder and said, "Yinchang, do you remember what I told you before? You talk too much. Which sentence do you want me to remember?" Guan Yu curled his lips and smiled. Yu Qianqiu was in a good mood today, so he didn't mind at all. "I've told you before that you'll be able to successfully build your foundation within 10 years. Guan Yu nodded and said, "Yes, but I have long since given up hope." Yu Qianqiu was taken aback. He rubbed his nose and sighed. "Since you don't have any hope, then forget it. During this time, I learned alchemy on supporting Immortal Island. It just so happened that I got the spiritual herb seeds needed to refine the foundation building pill today. Since you don't want it anymore, then Chen Feng and I will do it. Yinchang, you continue to plant your flowers." "What?" Guan Yu and Chen Feng were taken aback. Then they cried out at the same time, "Spiritual herb seeds?" The two of them knew that any kind of plant seeds could be planted here. If there really were spiritual herb seeds, what would it mean? After all, Guan Yu had stayed on supporting Immortal Island before. He understood the situation better than Chen Feng. The spiritual herb seeds on supporting Immortal Island weren't something that could be easily obtained. He didn't have the ability to do it. Moreover, Yu Qianqiu said that he had learned alchemy. If it was someone else, a qi condensation disciple would only be doing odd jobs and wouldn't have the qualifications to learn alchemy. If what Yu Qianqiu said was true, then this big brother Yu really wasn't your average kind of powerful. Guan Yu was completely convinced. "Chen Feng, let's go and find a place to plant the spiritual herb," Yu Qianqiu said proudly. "Wait." Guan Yu grabbed Yu Qianqiu's arm. The latter smiled and said, "Yinchang, what's wrong? You still want to fight with me? You're overestimating yourself." No. Boss, you misunderstood. I just want to ask you a few questions." Guan Yu smiled apologetically. "Oh." Yu Qianqiu nodded and said, "I'm in a good mood today. Go ahead." Guan Yu grabbed his arm and didn't let go. "Who did you worship when you entered supporting Immortal Island?" "The same surname as you, Guan Weiwu. Elder Guan is the elder in charge of the Alchemy Pavilion. It's possible that you can learn alchemy." Guan Yu gulped and asked again, "Then where did you steal the spiritual herb seeds from?" "Bullshit." Yu Qianqiu struggled to free his arm and said, "Do you think I'm the kind of person who would do such a thing? The seeds were personally given by Ma Jiugu from the Mulberry Garden." "Ah, the legendary Jiugu who has reached the late stage of tribulation passing? Why would she give you the seeds?" Guan Yu was surprised. "What's so strange about that? I have a good relationship with her. I'm living in the Mulberry Garden now, and eating well every day. Yu Qianqiu turned his head and said, "If you don't believe me, then forget it. I can't be bothered with you. Go plant your flowers. Chen Feng, let's go plant spiritual herbs." "Wait." Guan Yu smiled apologetically and said, "Boss, I was wrong. I shouldn't have doubted you. I'll accompany you to plant spiritual herbs." Yu Qianqiu looked at him and said with a proud smile, "Since we've known each other for so long, I won't argue with you. Quickly find a place and hurry up and start working." He didn't want to waste any more time teasing him. Moreover, he also wanted to plant the spiritual herbs as soon as possible. The white fox frowned slightly when she saw the jubilant expressions of the three of them. She did not believe that Yu Qianqiu had obtained these items easily like he had said. Otherwise, why would he have been so depressed over the past year, without showing any signs of it? "Boss, what do you think about planting it here? This is the land that Chen Feng and I have just plowed." Guan Yu nodded and pointed to the side of the land. This was the first time he talked to Yu Qianqiu like this. Moreover, it was so shameless. On the side, Chen Feng was so excited that he didn't know where to put his hands and feet. He kept rubbing his palms. Before he met Yu Qianqiu, he was worried about spirit stones. Unexpectedly, after coming here, spirit stones were so abundant that he didn't dare to use them even if he wanted to. Now he even had the opportunity to obtain a foundation establishment pill. After taking it, he could step into the foundation establishment stage. His old dream. Wait a moment. Yu Qianqiu waved his hand in a very magnanimous manner. Guan Yu and Chen Feng were stunned. They didn't know what this boss was going to do next. Yu Qianqiu held a small cloth bag in his hand and said with a serious expression, "Refining a foundation establishment pill requires 9 kinds of spiritual herbs. Ma Jugu gave me 10 sets of seeds for each kind. Everyone must be careful. You can only try to plant it and not fail. Otherwise, I can't guarantee that I will get it again. Do you understand?" Although he was suspected of taking this opportunity to increase his prestige, the two people involved didn't think so. Instead, they thought what he said was very reasonable. They also said with a serious expression, "Understood." The white fox, who was a few steps away, pursed her lips, turned her head, and smiled sweetly. Yu Qianqiu carefully opened the cloth bag. There were 9 small porcelain bottles inside. He took out one and handed it to Chen Feng. "Chen Feng, there should be 10 seeds inside. I also don't know what kind of spiritual herb it is. Try to plant one first." This was the seed of a spiritual herb used to refine a foundation establishment pill. Chen Feng's hands couldn't help but tremble. Yu Qianqiu rolled his eyes and scolded, "Damn it! Useless thing, why are your hands trembling? If it breaks, can you afford to pay for it? Guan Yu, why are you in a daze? I'm talking to you. Don't just stand there and watch. Help Chen Feng plant it." Seeing him gesticulating and scolding to his heart's content, the white fox, who had just turned her head, turned back again. Got it." Guan Yu immediately realized his mistake. He hurriedly took a bucket of water and squatted down to dig a small hole in the loose ground. He also untied the bamboo tube hanging on his waist and was ready to use it at any time. Chapter 72. Chen Feng removed the stopper from the small porcelain bottle and carefully poured a small seed into his palm. Then, he plugged the stopper back in. The seed was gently placed into the small hole. Guan Yu quickly scooped out a spoonful of purple chaos from the bamboo tube and added it into the hole. Chen Feng quickly covered the hole with soil. Guan Yu scooped out a spoonful of water from a bucket and poured it over the hole. After doing all this, the two of them exhaled and subconsciously wiped their sweaty foreheads. Then, they slowly stood up. The 4 pairs of eyes, including the white fox, stared intently at the small patch of ground that was soaked in water. After a long time, there was still no reaction from the small patch of ground. This was a little abnormal. Chen Feng and Guan Yu looked at each other. Yu Qianqiu frowned and said, "How can this be? Did you notice anything unusual about the purple chaos and the water while you were planting the flowers?" Chen Feng shook his head and said no. "Quick, look, there's a reaction." Guan Yu exclaimed in surprise. A few cracks quietly appeared on the small patch of ground that was previously wet. Everyone stared in surprise, But after waiting for a long time, there was another reaction. They saw a small white sprout poking its head out. Then, it slowly grew at an extremely slow speed. This speed was almost negligible compared to the speed at which the flowers grew. The speed is too slow. How can this be? Yu Qinshu frowned and said, "Is there any way to make it grow faster?" "Yes." Guan Yu stared at the sprout and replied, "If we add more purple chaos, it should be able to speed it up." "Boss, do you want to add it?" Yu Qinshu exhaled and said, "Let's do it. There's still 9 seeds left. At most, we could just waste one." Guan Yu nodded and pulled out a thin bamboo tube from his belt. Yu Qinshu took a closer look. It was a bamboo tube with a piston made using the syringe principle from his previous world. He couldn't help but smile. It seemed like these two guys were experienced in planting flowers. They must have sped up the growth of the flowers. With Chun Feng's help, the bamboo tube was filled with purple chaos. Guan Yu knelt down and carefully inserted the slender end of the tube into the soil under the white sprout. Then, he slowly pressed the other end of the wooden handle down. As the purple chaos in the bamboo tube was completely poured into it, the sprout visibly trembled, as if it had eaten something. Its growth rate also increased significantly. Guan Yu pulled out the bamboo tube and quickly covered the hole in the ground with soil. After standing up, he looked at the sprout and nodded. "Boss, it looks like we can still get another tube. Do you want another tube? Failure is the mother of success. Don't be afraid, just do it." Yu Qinshu agreed. Guan Yu and Chun Feng cooperated to give the sprout another injection. The effect was very obvious. Although it was still a lot slower than the flowers, it was still very fast. Guan Yu exclaimed, "Spiritual grass is indeed spiritual grass. It really is extraordinary. It has already used a dozen times more purple chaos than the flowers, but it is still growing slower than the flowers." The things that grew out of the sprout were not very good looking. Although it was still growing, it was only the size of a palm. It was still black and didn't look like a spiritual grass at all. Guan Yu and Chun Feng had never seen it before. Yu Qinshu said with a smile, "Chun Feng, this is the dirt-repelling grass. It is one of the essential spiritual grass for refining the building foundation Dan. I will leave the bottle in your hand to you for safekeeping. In the future, this dirt-repelling grass will be planted by you. Remember to collect a lot of seeds. Don't let the seeds break. If they break, there will be no place to plant them." Chun Feng nodded. Not long after, a few flower stems came out of the dirt-repelling grass. The flower buds on top of the stems slowly rose up. When they reached a certain position, the flower buds swelled up from the black leaves. When the flower buds began to slightly open, a faintly discernible fragrance overflowed. It was this faintly discernible flower fragrance that completely suppressed the fragrance of the surrounding sea of flowers. It really is a spiritual grass. Just the fragrance of this flower has suppressed the fragrance of the thousands of flowers here. Chun Feng couldn't help but exclaim in admiration. The white fox gently fanned her jade-like nose. She moved closer and took a deep breath. It seemed like she also liked this fragrance. The 6 flowers had completely bloomed. There were a few short golden hairs hidden in the pale white petals. It was very beautiful. Yu Qinshu shouted in a deep voice. Yinchang balanced the yin and yang. Pollinate the flowers. Don't waste even a single seed. He had already brought in a few hives of bees. However, because of the purple chaos, the flowers' flowering period was too short. Obviously, there wasn't enough time for the bees to pollinate it. Got it. Guan Yu's movements were light and quick as he pollinated the 6 flowers. He didn't pick one flower first and pollinate it like normal flowers. For this spiritual grass, wasting one flower meant wasting a lot of precious seeds. After the time it took to drink a cup of tea, the plucked seeds were already in Chun Feng's hands. This flower was also very strange. One flower could bear 6 seeds. 6 flowers were exactly 36 seeds. The few of them happily looked at the plucked seeds. Unfortunately, because of the purple chaos, the dirt-repelling grass didn't last long before it withered. However, the success of the dirt-repelling grass gave the 3 of them a lot of confidence. Yu Qianqiu tested the other 8 bottles one by one. In the end, he found out that ginseng was the easiest to plant. After it grew under the soil, no matter how much purple chaos he put in, it would only increase its age quickly. It wouldn't wilt. The seeds were even easier to pluck. Basically, it would flower and bear fruit once in a year. The seeds could be plucked many times. He also found some problems. It turned out that the diamond fruit was a vine plant. It wasn't easy to grow on flat ground. It needed to be in a place with trees so that it could be easily entangled. One plant could only bear 12 fruits. The fruits it bore were really worthy of the name diamond. Even with a sword, one could only leave a white mark on it. The most troublesome one was the lingji. When the porcelain bottle was opened, they only saw some powder inside. It wasn't a seed at all. The 3 of them were a little dumbfounded. Yu Qianqiu had never come across this thing in a mulberry garden. He didn't know how to plant it. He regretted not asking Furong. Maybe she knew. It was all thanks to the white fox. She cultivated in the deep mountains and forests. She had seen a lot of things like this. With her explanation, the 3 of them finally understood. The lingji didn't matter if it was a seed or not. Once it was crushed, it would naturally become a seed. No wonder the porcelain bottle was filled with powder. This made Yu Qianqiu remember some knowledge from his previous life. This lingji should also be a kind of fungus. Finally, under the white fox's guidance, they succeeded in planting it next to the roots of the big tree. After each success, Yu Qianqiu finally let out a sigh of relief. He gave 9 porcelain bottles to Guan Yu and Qin Feng. 3 days later, I'm going to start refining foundation building pills. I want 100 of each of the 9 kinds of spiritual plants. Can you guys grow them? Yu Qianqiu looked at the 2 of them. The 2 of them looked at each other. Guan Yu asked, "You want so many?" Yu Qianqiu nodded and said solemnly, "I want to refine enough foundation building pills in one go. I don't believe that with a lot of foundation building pills, the 3 of us can't build our foundation successfully." In fact, the reason why he asked for so many was because he had never personally refined foundation building pills before. He didn't have the slightest confidence, so he was prepared to use spiritual plants to build them. He believed that even if he was lucky, he could still refine 1 or 2 batches. Hearing that they could refine enough foundation building pills, Guan Yu and Qin Feng were so excited that their eyes glowed green. The 2 of them looked at each other and nodded. Guan Yu excitedly patted his chest and promised, "Boss, don't worry. Even if we don't eat or sleep for these 3 days, we'll help you grow those 100 batches." Yu Qianqiu happily said, "Good. When the time comes, we'll have enough foundation building pills. I believe we can definitely build our foundation successfully." Suddenly, he frowned and said, "You 2, don't just ignore the quality of the spiritual plants just to make up the numbers, especially the ginseng and the lingji. They must be at least 100 years old. Otherwise, they can't be considered as spiritual plants." This was related to whether or not they could successfully build their foundation, so the 2 of them immediately promised again and again. Yu Qianqiu hurriedly went back. He still wanted to look for Yin Zixiao in the next few days to improve his pill concocting skills. Chapter 73. The path leading from the river to the seaside was overgrown with weeds. Yin Zixia and her great-granny would always fly through the air every time they came here. Ever since her great-granny handed Yu Qianqiu to her, she had never come here again. She knew what her great-granny was thinking. A man and a woman walked quietly by the river. Although it was not as fast as flying, Yin Zixia was happy to walk slowly like this. The originally roadless river had already been vaguely stepped on by the 2 of them. Yu Qianqiu was always half a step behind her, his attitude very respectful. Walking in front, Yin Zixia bit her lips. During the time they were together, they had almost never talked about anything else. As they walked slowly, she wanted to speak a few times, but once she opened her mouth, she couldn't think of anything else. In the end, she didn't say anything. She wanted to take the initiative to express goodwill, but because of her high and mighty status, she couldn't take the initiative to lower her stance. She wasn't used to doing this. Should she take the initiative or not? This question was constantly in her mind. Actually, Yu Qianzhou's mind was also spinning nonstop. He was thinking about how to ask Yin Zixia. He had always been her assistant. He didn't know if she would agree to let him personally refine pills. Damn it. He had already done something as shameless as kneeling. Why would he be afraid of asking this? Yu Qianzhou cleared his throat and chuckled. Senior apprentice, Aunt Yin, this disciple wants to ask you for a favor. Yin Zixia hated this form of address more and more. It pulled apart the seniority of two people who were about the same age. Stopping, she frowned and said a little stiffly, "What is it?" She immediately regretted saying it. Why couldn't she change her tone? This disciple is very envious of Senior Apprentice Sant's alchemy skills. You see, this disciple has been following you for so long. Even if I don't have any merits, I have worked hard. This disciple also wants to have a taste of alchemy. Senior Apprentice Aunt, can you let me have a taste as well? Yu Qianzhou pleaded. Is that it? Yin Zixia's tone was a little disappointed. Yu Qianzhou was really afraid that she wouldn't agree. He asked tentatively, Senior Apprentice Aunt, is that all right? Yin Zixia was just about to speak when she suddenly thought that this was an opportunity. She paused for a moment and couldn't help but smile sweetly. Her beautiful smile was like a blooming flower. Yu Qianzhou was stunned and thought to himself, this girl is really hot. If I didn't have to follow Ma Jiugu, this scary old lady, I would find a way to have a taste of her. Seeing Yu Qianzhou looking at her, as if he was about to drool, Yin Zixia was overjoyed. If it was someone else looking at her like this, she would probably get angry. She had always been proud of her looks, but Yu Qianzhou had made her lose her confidence. She didn't know that Yu Qianzhou was worried about Ma Jiugu. A man like Yu Qianzhou was definitely not a good person. He had absolutely no immunity to beautiful women. As long as he thought it was a beautiful woman, he would have the urge to flirt with her. As for whether he would really flirt with her, it was completely based on his own moral bottom line. This was also how he behaved and did things. There was no such thing as good or bad. Whether he should do it or not, it was completely based on his own moral view that could be modified at any time. He could barely be regarded as a capricious gentleman. It couldn't be said that he didn't have morals. It was just that most of the time, his instinct was to seek advantages and avoid disadvantages. This could be seen from what happened in the mulberry garden. In order to get the spiritual herb seeds, he once wanted to flirt with Yin Zixia, but unfortunately, the conditions didn't allow it. When he was bored, he wanted to flirt with the beauties in the mulberry garden, but unfortunately, the conditions didn't allow it. He also wanted to flirt with the beautiful woman in the mulberry garden, Lan Bingxue. But sometimes, people always had to face the reality. In front of absolute strength, it was better to honestly hide his thoughts. Although Chu Ping played a major role in kneeling in front of Ma Jiugu, it couldn't be helped. Even if there was a little way, he wouldn't kneel. Sometimes, after all, face was not as practical as reality. According to a saying that he learned when he was a soldier in his previous life, flexible strategies and tactics were the magic weapon to defeat the enemy. At least after the incident, he comforted himself in this way. He felt that it was a smart move to kneel. Then why did Chu Ping have a place in his heart for someone like him? Was it because of Chu Ping's beauty? No, it was not. She was beautiful. He could flirt with her as much as he wanted. In his eyes, it was not a big deal. The reason was both simple and complicated. In every man's heart, there was a high ground that would be occupied by a woman sooner or later. The more messy a man experienced, the better he would protect this high ground. Sometimes, even he didn't know that it was difficult for others to touch it. Chu Ping happened to succeed. For this kind of woman, men were often crazy. Some men could give up anything for this kind of woman, whether it was money, beautiful women, or power. They could give up all of these things that men loved most. Some people could even give up the throne and the country. In this case, would Yu Qianzhou only love Chu Ping for the rest of his life? Or would he never cheat on her and only be loyal to her physically? Well, God knows. You can make your own judgment. But in terms of feelings, I can guarantee it. Yin Zixia saw that the person she had a crush on was attracted by her appearance, and her confidence returned. Her thoughts also became clear. Don't you want to refine pills by yourself? Okay, I promise you. Yu Qianqiu happily bowed and said, Thank you, Marshal Aunt Yen. Thank you, Marshal Aunt Yen. Don't thank me first. I still have something to ask you. It won't be too late to thank me after you answer me to my satisfaction. Yen Zixia smiled. Her full breast subconsciously puffed out. This was one of the things she was most proud of, and also one of the ways she thought she could attract men. But for her to do such a thing to a man, it could be considered unprecedented. Unfortunately, Yu Qianqiu also didn't notice her seductive action. He was muttering in his heart, If you aren't a family, you won't enter the same house. This saying is true. This grandfather and grandson pair are always the same when they agree to something. There was no helping it. He was the one asking for help, so he had to hold it in even if he had any opinions. He respectfully said, Marshal Aunt, please ask. After Yin Zixia puffed out her chest, her face turned red. Fortunately, the other party didn't notice. She was vexed and a little disappointed. She took a breath and calmed herself down. She slowly said, I know you are on Kuang Sung's Yu Qianqiu. Don't deny it, but don't be in a hurry to deny it. Let me finish first. I don't have any ulterior motives for saying this. I won't tell anyone about your matter. You can rest assured. Damn it. How can I rest assured when my weakness is in your hands? Yu Qianqiu's face twitched and said, If you have anything to say, ask quickly. Since his identity had already been exposed, there was no need to be polite and call him Marshal Aunt. Chapter 74. Yin Zixia didn't know that her words had aroused Yu Qianqiu's disgust. Instead, she was secretly happy that he didn't call her martial uncle. She smiled faintly and said, It said that On Kuang Sung once imprisoned a white fox spirit that had cultivated for 1,000 years. I heard that you wrote these 2 songs for that fox spirit. Is that right? Yu Qianqiu was stunned at first. He didn't expect her to ask this question. Then he frowned. The white fox wasn't only his sister, but he also treated her as his sister from the bottom of his heart. There weren't many people in this world that he really cared about, and the fox spirit that Yin Zixia mentioned was one of them. Someone kept calling his sister a fox spirit. Although it was a fact, he was quite unhappy in his heart. He had knelt down for the foundation-building pill. Seeing that victory wasn't far away, he had to endure this little bit of unhappiness. He suppressed the chill in his heart and forced a smile on his face. He nodded and said, Marshal Uncle is really amazing. You even know these small things. Not only did he answer Yin Zixia's question, but he also undoubtedly admitted his identity as On Kuang Sung. Why did he call her Marshal Uncle again? Yin Zixia frowned slightly and said, Don't worry. I won't tell anyone about your past. I believe that you don't have any other purpose in coming to Fuxin Island. I'm just curious why you would write songs for a fox spirit. Can you tell me why? Yu Qianqiu laughed and said, It's purely because she helped me a little. I couldn't repay her for the time being, so I wrote 2 songs for her. There's no other reason. Oh, is that so? Yin Zixia rolled her eyes and stared at him. She smiled and said, Then I asked you to refine pills personally. Is that considered helping you? Yes. Marshal Uncle helped me. I will repay you in the future. Yu Qianqiu smiled. Yin Zixia bit her lips again and said with a smile, I see. I don't need you to repay me. I don't know what that fox spirit helped you for you to write 2 songs for her. I won't ask what it was. If I help you this time, is it worth it for you to compose a song for me? She then added, Actually, the song you played a while ago, The Ocean's Roar, was pretty good. Unfortunately, it's not suitable for me, and it's not a gift for me. I only need a song that can match one of those 2 songs. Oomph. First, you told me not to worry, and now you're giving me a request. Isn't this clearly threatening me? How about I give you a song called 18 Touches? It was guaranteed to spread throughout the world. Once a person had a bad first impression of someone, it was very difficult to change it. It was the same for men towards women, and it was the same for beautiful women. Yu Qianqiu had always been a suspicious person, not to mention that he had been caught red-handed. No matter what the other party said, he would twist it a few times. The more he listened, the more he felt that the other party was threatening him. He could not see any affection in the other party's words, but it was true that he was grinding his teeth in hatred. He secretly gritted his teeth and smiled bitterly. Marshall Uncle really thinks too highly of me. Since Marshall Uncle doesn't mind my lack of talent and learning, I will definitely compose a song for Marshall Uncle. But a good song can't be composed on a whim. Marshall Uncle, can you let me owe you for now, and let me think about it for a while? Yin Zixia pondered for a while and thought about it. No matter how talented a person was, it was impossible for him to open his mouth and sing a song that would spread throughout the world. If there was a song like White Fox singing about me like that vixen, she should really let him think about it. She probably could not imagine that the so-called songs that Yu Qianqiu composed were all plagiarized. But who would know? Then let me think about it. You can give it to me when you're done. Yin Zixia nodded. Thank you for your tolerance, Marshall Uncle. I will definitely do my best to compose a good song for Marshall Uncle. Yu Qianqiu said so, but in fact, he did not intend to do so. He planned to delay it day by day. Once he successfully refined the foundation-building pill and built his foundation, he would simply find a song to pass the time. There's one more thing. Yin Zixia looked at Yu Qianqiu, and a trace of shyness suddenly flashed in her eyes. She said softly, "In the future, when it's just the two of us, you're not allowed to call me Marshall Uncle. When there are outsiders, do as you please." No matter how gentle she was, no matter how beautiful she was. Unfortunately, in a certain person's eyes, gentleness and beauty could not be seen. She had already become a pink skeleton that needed to be constantly guarded against. Yu Qianqiu asked doubtfully, "Not calling you Marshall Uncle? Then what should I call you?" Yin Zixia said shyly, "Just call me Zixia. That's not good, right?" Yu Qianqiu glanced at her suspiciously. "If I say it's okay, then it's okay. Anyway, when there's no one else, you're not allowed to call me Marshall Uncle. You can only call me by my name." Yin Zixia was annoyed that this idiot was a little unromantic. She stomped her feet and simply said, "I'll call you Qianqiu from now on. If you don't agree, then I won't agree to your alchemy." Her words were so obvious. No matter how stupid Yu Qianqiu was, he could still see some clues. Could it be that this girl has fallen for me? Thinking that it was possible, he laughed and said, "Zixia, as long as Marshall Uncle likes it. Then in the future when there's no one around, I'll call you Marshall Uncle Zixia." Hearing that he was finally willing to call her Zixia, Yin Zixia immediately blushed. She had never thought about pursuing a man, but sometimes feelings were just so strange. For some reason, she just had to fall for this ordinary-looking man. She turned her blushing face and said, "Qianqiu, let's go." After saying that, she walked away on her own as if she was running away. "Qianqiu?" Yu Qianqiu was startled. He felt a toothache when he heard that. He reckoned that this matter was not far from what he had guessed. This girl might really have fallen for him. But after thinking about it, he felt that it was unreasonable. This stinky body was not qualified to be a handsome man, and his cultivation was not high. Could it be that she was conquered by his personal charm? The more he thought about it, the more he felt that it was possible. It was fine if there was a bubbly, beautiful Chu Pinger, but there was also a bubbly, beautiful Yin Zixia. It was really time to examine his own charm. The only thing he didn't expect was that these two beauties were bewitched by the songs that he had plagiarized. They both thought that he was a gifted man. In addition to beauties who loved heroes, there were also many beauties who loved gifted men. In order to prove his guess, Yu Qianqiu shouted, "Zixia, walk slowly. Wait for me." The beautiful woman who was walking quickly in front of him heard his shout. Her shoulders trembled, and she really slowed down. Yu Qianqiu chuckled and followed her. He glanced sideways at the beauty unscrupulously and called out with a smile, "Zixia." "Yes." Yin Zixia replied softly with a blushing face. Yu Qianqiu was happy in his heart. However, one must always be on guard against others. He thought of a guess that he already had and said with a smile, "Zixia, actually, I saw you before I joined supporting Immortal Island." Yin Zixia raised her head and looked at him in surprise. "Ah, really? She wanted to say, then why don't I have any impression of you?" Although she didn't say it out loud, Yu Qianshou could guess it. He didn't mind it, and said with a smile, "That day, when I was in Hundred Flowers Valley and was about to join Supporting Immortal Island with the Supporting Immortal token, I saw Elder Qin sending you out. There was also a young man accompanying you. I seem to have heard the shopkeeper address the young man, and you as young palace master and young lady." "Ah, you were there too? How is that possible? Then why didn't I see him?" Yin Zixia blushed again. She thought to herself, "What's wrong with me today? I thought I saw an outsider in the shop, but I didn't even look at him. Since he could say it so clearly, it must be him." She didn't expect that the person she didn't even look at that day would be chasing after her today. "Hey, you are a noble person with short memories. I am just an insignificant person. Why would you look at me?" Yu Qianshou said with a smile. "Of course not. I was busy at that time and didn't pay attention." Yin Zixia explained. I understand. Yu Qianshou smiled craftily. However, that shopkeeper addressed the young man as young palace master and called you young lady. "I am very curious about your identity. You even know my hidden identity. I wonder if I can know yours?" Yin Zixia was silent for a while and bit her lips. "The young man you're talking about is my older brother. Hundred Flowers Palace Master is my mother. That day, I went to the shop to find Elder Qin to discuss my joining Supporting Immortal Island." Chapter 75. "Ah!" Yu Qianshou exclaimed. He had heard from Guan Yu that the palace mistress of Hundred Flowers Palace was the daughter of the previous Sect master of Fuxian Island. During this time, he also learned that the current Sect master was the disciple of the previous Sect master. Guan Weiwu was the son of the previous Sect master, and Ma Jiugu was the aunt of the previous Sect master. No wonder Yin Zixia called Ma Jiugu great-grandmother. Her seniority was really high. "You were doing well in the Hundred Flowers Valley. Why did you come to Fuxian Island?" Yin Zixia shook her head and said, "I don't know the specifics. My father and mother discussed it. My brother went to 10,000 demons to learn spells, and I came to Fuxian Island to learn alchemy." Yu Qianshou nodded thoughtfully. It was said that the previous Sect master of Supporting Immortal Island had no choice but to step down because of his daughter's matter. In reality, he had passed the position to his disciple, Feng Xiangtian. Yin Zixia's identity didn't seem to be known by many in Supporting Immortal Island. If everyone knew that she was from the Flower Palace, it would probably be impossible for her to join Supporting Immortal Island. It was no wonder that Yin Zixia was so low-key in Supporting Immortal Island. It was estimated that her brother's situation in 10,000 Demons was similar. A son and a daughter joined the number 1 sect of the Devil Dao and the number 1 sect of the Righteous Dao respectively. This was a little interesting. The two of them came to the bottom of the cliff by the sea. Just as Yu Qianshou rolled up his sleeves and was about to climb up, Yin Zixia lifted him up. This made his pride as a man suffer a great blow. He secretly vowed to succeed in building his foundation as soon as possible. The temperature of the alchemy chamber in the belly of the mountain was scorching. Although Yu Qianshou still struggled to carry it, he gradually became able to bear it after coming here a few times. It was just that his vital qi was greatly consumed. However, with a large number of spirit stones, he could recover it very quickly. Yin Zixia did not go back on her words. Yu Qianshou achieved his wish of refining the alchemy personally. The former took out a large amount of common spirit herbs that her great-grandmother had prepared for her from her storage pouch for the latter to use to her heart's content. After personally doing it, Yu Qianshou discovered that there was a huge difference between what he had learned and what he had learned in theory. Putting aside the fact that he was not proficient in the technique, it was very painful for him to use his divine sense to observe and control the concoction of pills in the scorching hot furnace. This was the first time Yu Qianshou's divine sense had just entered the blazing furnace when he let out a loud cry. He quickly retracted his divine sense. His entire body's skin had turned bright red, as if it had been scalded by fire. As a result, his divine sense had been damaged, and his entire body was dispirited. It gave Yin Zixia fright. Only then did she remember that her great-grandmother had said that those who had not reached the foundation building stage or above were not suitable to learn alchemy. Yu Qianqiu took out a piece of upper-grade spirit stone and absorbed all the spiritual qi within it. Only then did his damaged divine sense recover. Yin Zixiao's heart ached for him. She told him what his great-grandmother had said and advised him not to try anymore. Yu Qianqiu stubbornly shook his head and said, "Didn't your great-grandmother say that? Although the qi refining stage is not suitable for alchemy, as long as you train your divine sense to be strong enough, you can also concoct pills. Since others can do it, I believe I can also do it." In the midst of his miserable cries, Yu Qianqiu's divine sense stayed in the furnace for a longer and longer time. Seeing him being so cruel and torturing himself, Yin Zixiao's heart ached, but she could not persuade him. She could only accompany him by the side and shed tears. Time passed day by day. The time his divine sense stayed in the furnace was not enough to control the time needed to concoct a furnace of pills. In the midst of his discouragement, he was pleasantly surprised to find that his divine sense could actually extend to a place dozens of meters away. He could observe all the movements within a radius of dozens of meters. Furthermore, his control over his divine sense was becoming more and more smooth. He could not fulfill the promise of concocting pills in 3 days. Yu Qianqiu returned to the Golden Pearl and solemnly apologized to Guan Yu and Chen Feng. After repeatedly assuring him, he finally obtained their forgiveness. Subsequently, he stayed in the secret alchemy room for a long time. Yin Zixia also asked for leave from her great-grandmother and accompanied him by his side. His divine sense was injured again and again, and he also took out pieces of high-grade spirit stones to treat his injuries. When Yin Zixia shifted her attention from him to the high-grade spirit stones in his hands for the first time, she could not help but be shocked. If she remembered correctly, the number of spirit stones that Yu Qianqiu used to treat his injuries in the past month was probably more than 1,000. Heavens! More than 1,000 high-grade spirit stones. How was this possible? How could a qi refining stage disciple have so many spirit stones? Even if she was the biological daughter of the palace master of Hundred Flowers Palace, it would be difficult for her to take out so many spirit stones so casually. That was equivalent to 10 million low-grade spirit stones. She grew up in the Hundred Flowers Valley, so she knew the market prices of many items. Naturally, she understood how many things this number could buy in the cultivation world. Later, when she saw that he was still able to take out pieces of high-grade spirit stones, Yin Zixiao was already used to it. She was just curious as to where he got so many spirit stones from. However, this was a bit too extravagant. Although the spiritual energy contained in high-grade spirit stones could heal damaged divine sense very quickly, a piece of high-grade spirit stone was enough to buy nearly 50 divine sense repairing pills. When Yu Qianqiu was delighted to find that his divine sense could extend to a radius of nearly 100 meters, the two of them had unknowingly stayed in the cave for a full 3 months. During this period, only Yin Zixia occasionally went out to get food and water, but Yu Qianqiu did not take a single step out. When she saw that he was sweating profusely, Yin Zixia would fetch cold water, wet a handkerchief, and carefully wipe him. When she saw that he was tired and did not want to move, she would send food to his mouth. As for Yu Qianqiu, since he knew that Yin Zixia liked him, he enjoyed it with peace of mind, as if taking care of him was what he should do. From the beginning, when his divine sense was injured, to a muffled groan, to a slight frown, Yu Qianqiu's divine sense could already stay in the pill furnace for a day. Although Yin Zixia had not experienced the pain of divine sense being injured, she had heard people say that it was much more painful than physical injuries. She could not figure out why he was doing this, and when she could not bear to see it, she advised him to stop more than once. Who knew that Yu Qianqiu would say with a slight smile, "How can you see the rainbow without experiencing the wind and rain? If you want to do something, how can you not suffer a little? Not everything can be achieved easily. Men, sometimes, not only do you have to be ruthless to others, if you want to succeed, you have to be even more ruthless to yourself." Although he said it very easily, Yin Zixia's heart trembled, and she looked at him with a complicated expression. In the future, she did not advise him again, and only did what she thought she should do, taking care of him with all her heart. If this matter was seen by people who knew her identity, they would probably be dumbfounded. The dignified 100-Flower Palace's young miss actually did this kind of thing to serve others. However, Yu Qianqiu did not think so. He only knew that people would pay attention to their status when they got married, and they would pay attention to the fact that their families were well-matched. What did dating have to do with status? The ordinary spiritual herbs used in 3 months could be counted as piles. Fortunately, supporting a mortal island had a lot of such spiritual herbs, so no one would care about it. Unfortunately, the success rate of his alchemy was still very low. He could barely make 1 furnace out of 20, and at most 10 pills in 1 furnace. They were all ordinary pills used in the cultivation world to treat external injuries. According to his success rate, even if he went out to refine pills for people for free, he was afraid that people would be scared away. The price of refining a furnace of pills was too high. However, Yu Qianqiu felt that it was almost enough. He estimated that 100 sets of spiritual herbs could at least make 3 or 4 furnaces. Moreover, with enough spiritual herbs as a backing, it was time to refine foundation-building pills. He decided to rest for a day and adjust his mental state to its peak before he started refining. Chapter 76. On the way back along the river, Yu Qianqiu glanced at the curvaceous figure beside him. He couldn't help but feel lustful and gradually moved closer to her. During the time in the cave, he had touched Yin Zixia many times, but he only took advantage of her. For example, he touched her buttocks, sneakily attacked her breasts, and so on. It was lonely in the cave. Under the circumstance that Yin Zixia couldn't resist strongly, Boss Yu naturally enjoyed these little tricks, which made Yin Zixia feel ashamed and resentful. She didn't expect him to be so bold, but she couldn't do anything about it. Fortunately, Yu Qianqiu's mind was focused on learning to refine elixirs, so he didn't do anything more excessive. After being cooped up in the cave for 3 months, their relationship had improved by leaps and bounds. It was not easy for them to come out and relax. Naturally, a certain someone's lust was aroused. Just as he was considering whether to eat Yin Zixia right now, a demonic claw quietly lifted up and was about to pat her perky buttocks. What? Yin Zixia suddenly looked up to the sky. Yu Qianqiu forgot to do anything and also looked up. There were 2 people flying in the direction of Penglai Pavilion on their swords. Yin Zixia turned her head and asked, "Qianqiu, do you see the 2 people on the sword?" Judging from their clothes, they seemed to be Ong Quangsung's disciples. What are they doing here? They didn't fly fast on their swords. Obviously, Fushin Island was their destination. Yu Qianqiu was very familiar with Ong Quangsung's clothes, so he recognized the 2 people at a glance. They were Ong Quangsung's disciples. He retracted his demonic claw inadvertently and frowned. He shook his head and said, "I don't know, but it shouldn't be for me." After this incident, he lost the interest to do evil. When the 2 returned to the mulberry garden and were about to separate, Yu Qianqiu urged, "Zixia, if possible, can you help me ask Ong Quangsung's disciples why they are here?" "Okay." Yin Zixia nodded lightly and called out to him, who was about to turn and leave. She said shyly, "Qianqiu, when will you move into the inner garden? I'll help you tell Annie Lan. Why do you want to live in the inner garden?" Yu Qianqiu was taken aback. He pointed at Furong, who was busy in the garden, and said, "No need to trouble yourself. I'm already used to living together with Martial Aunt Furong. That's all. See you tomorrow." As he said that, he turned around and walked towards the spiritual herb field and shouted with a grin, "Martial Uncle Furong, do you need help?" Yin Zixia stared blankly at Yu Qianqiu, who was rushing to do the work. She stood there for a while and murmured, "Have you gotten used to living with her?" She sighed faintly and returned to the inner garden. Right after she left, Lan Bingxue walked out from the gate of the inner garden slowly. She looked at Yin Zixia, who had disappeared into the inner garden, then at the man and the woman in the spiritual herbs field, and frowned. Furong couldn't dissuade Yu Qianqiu, so she had to give the thing in her hand to Yu Qianqiu. Looking at the man who was bowing and busy in front of her, she thought that she hadn't seen him for 3 months. It was so good to see him again. He should be her only friend in the mulberry garden. The expression on her disfigured face changed. From the half of her face, it could be seen that she smiled, although the smile was a bit scary. After they finished their work, you carried the pole and I carried the ladle, and they went back to their own nest. Yu Qianqiu disappeared from his bed without any hesitation. Furong just glanced at him. She was curious about Yu Qianqiu's behavior, but she was already used to it. As soon as Yu Qianqiu went back to the golden bead, he was shocked. Guan Yu was feeding a red pony. Where did this pony come from? Was there another passage in the golden bead that led to the outside? This was his nest to protect his life. Guan Yu also noticed him. He waved at him and said with a smile, "Boss, come and see my red rabbit." Yu Qianqiu walked over with a calm face and asked, "Where did you get this pony?" Guan Yu laughed and said, "I really didn't expect it. Boss, do you remember the 2 horses that we sent to the 100 Flowers Valley last time? It turned out to be a male and a female. This little fellow was born from them." "Oh." Yu Qianqiu let out a sigh of relief. So it was like this. The pony was very cute. Its red fur was glossy and smooth. Its beautiful big eyes blinked. Seeing a stranger coming, it wasn't afraid. It turned its head to look at them, neighed, and swung its ponytail twice, as if it was greeting them. Yu Qianqiu said with a smile, "It's really beautiful." "Yinchang, is it male or female?" "Of course it's male," Guan Yu said proudly. "TSK, TSK." Yu Qianqiu walked over and touched its smooth fur. He said, "It's still a handsome guy." Suddenly, he saw the radish in Guan Yu's hand that he was feeding the pony. He was startled and asked doubtfully, "Yinchang, did you sell radish seeds when you went to the 100 Flowers Valley last time?" "Radish?" Guan Yu was stunned. He looked at the thing in his hand and said with disdain, "This is a radish? Boss, don't tell me you can't even recognize ginseng. How can I feed radish to the future red rabbit horse? Only you can think of that." "Ginseng?" Yu Qianqiu touched his nose and said with a smile, "This ginseng that hasn't been dried looks like a radish." Needless to say, this ginseng was definitely grown from the seeds that he brought. However, using ginseng to feed a horse was indeed a little too extravagant. "Red Rabbit, come here," someone called out softly. The 2 of them turned their heads and saw the white fox holding a bunch of lush green grass in its hand, calling out to it. The little red rabbit sneezed and turned its head to look. It let out a happy cry and turned its small body around. It raised its 4 shiny black hooves and ran. This little fellow still knew how to be protective of the fair sex. It knew that fresh flowers shouldn't be stepped on, so it turned a corner and ran through the field. Guan Yu held the half of the ginseng and complained, "Heartless fellow." Yu Qianqiu chuckled at the side. Just as he was about to get down to business, Chun Feng's angry voice came from the forest. He roared, "Guan Yu, you bastard, you stole my ginseng to feed the horse again. What happened?" Yu Qianqiu asked. Guan Yu smiled awkwardly. "Nothing much. That Chen Feng brat is too stingy. Pulling out 2 ginseng to feed the red rabbit already makes my heart ache." Yu Qianqiu let out an "oh" sound and didn't mind. With the existence of the purple chaos, pulling out 2 ginseng to feed the horse was indeed nothing. Moreover, that little fellow was too cute. It deserved to eat something good to nourish itself. Sigh. If he had known earlier, he would have given the task of planting ginseng to Guan Yu. However, Chun Feng's attitude was completely different from the other 2. He ran over and rolled up his sleeves, looking like he was going to fight to the death with Guan Yu. Guan Yu couldn't be compared to Yu Qianqiu and the white fox. Chun Feng's current cultivation level was the same as his, so if they were to fight, it was hard to say who would have the upper hand. However, as the boss, Yu Qianqiu naturally couldn't watch his 2 little brothers fight in front of him. He separated them in the middle and shouted, "Chen Feng, what are you doing? We are all brothers. Do you need to fight to pull out 2 ginseng?" "2 ginseng?" Chen Feng pointed at Guan Yu and said angrily, "If it was just 2 normal ginseng, I wouldn't have said anything. But the ginseng that this bastard pulled out were all 100-year-old ginseng that I had painstakingly planted. Those were all prepared for concocting the foundation-building pill. For that stupid horse, he stole close to 100-year-old ginseng from me in the past 2 months. This is intolerable. Stole close to 100-year-old ginseng to feed to the horse? The muscles on Yu Qianshou's face twitched. 2 black lines appeared on his forehead. He stared angrily at Guan Yu. No one can ruin my grand plan of building my foundation. Guan Yu smiled awkwardly and said that, "Boss, let me explain. Didn't you see that after my scarlet rabbit ate the 100-year-old ginseng, its fur became bright and full of spiritual energy? I thought my ass. Chen Feng, beat this bastard to death for me," Yu Qianshou said while gnashing his teeth. 2 figures pounced at Guan Yu. Under the rather angry punches and kicks, the latter let out a blood-curdling scream. Chapter 77. Yu Qianshou was fighting to his heart's content when he suddenly sensed something charging over. He didn't hurry to turn around and instead turned around to sweep his leg. With a pong sound, the colt was sent flying. Yu Qianshou was stunned. The foal struggled to get up from the ground and charged at Chen Feng, who was punching and kicking. "Stupid horse, you ate my ginseng and still dare to help the evildoer. F*CKU. Yu Qianshou kicked the horse again and helped Chen Feng out. "Stop!" The white fox shouted, and her figure appeared in front of them. With the white fox speaking, Yu Qianshou and Chen Feng didn't dare to make a move. The 2 of them cursed and stood to the side. The white fox told them to stop, but didn't tell them to stop. Instead, the foal got up and ran to Guan Yu, who was sitting on the ground with his hands on his head. It bit on his green robe and gently pulled. "Hey, this stupid horse can really take a beating. A normal adult horse wouldn't be able to take 2 kicks from me. Looks like I didn't eat ginseng for nothing. Heh, it's a little intelligent now. It knows how to protect its owner at such a young age," Yu Qianshou said to Chen Feng. Chen Feng replied with yes and yes. The white fox then rolled her eyes at them. The 2 of them chuckled and shut up. Seeing that the white fox had arrived, the badly battered Guan Yu finally felt relieved and stood up. He stroked the 3 strands of his long beard that had been messed up and patted the footprints on his green robe. He looked at the 2 assailants resentfully and knew that he was in the wrong first. Without saying anything else, he muttered, "Boss, it's fine if you hit me, but why didn't you let go of such a small horse?" "Huh, this man and horse were really interesting." Yu Qianshou laughed and scolded, "Damn, is your horse more important or us foundation establishment? You're crazy. I don't want to waste time with you. You 2 prepare 100 sets of spirit herbs for the foundation establishment pill. Your boss will start concocting pills tomorrow." "Really?" Chen Feng said happily. Guan Yu had also forgotten about being beaten up just now. He opened his eyes wide in excitement. "Yes, I've finally found a suitable place to concoct pills. I can start now," said Yu Qianshou with a smile. He wasn't going to tell her that the previous 3-day appointment was because his skills weren't up to par. He made up a lie and said that he hadn't found a good place to concoct pills. As for the fact that he had suffered so much to learn alchemy, he was even less likely to mention it. If he did, it would really damage the prestige of his boss. Both of them nodded and went to prepare the spiritual herbs without saying anything else. The colt limped along with Guan Yu, who had just been beaten. Yu Qianshou gritted his teeth at the sight of it and scolded jokingly, "Lousy horse." The white fox's slender and fair neck gently twisted as she looked at him and said, "As far as I know, it's not easy for aura condensation cultivators to concoct panaceas. Have you really learned it? Look at what Big Sister is saying. Don't you know whose little brother I am? How could such a small matter stump me? Of course, I've really learned it," Yu Qianshou said proudly. The white fox turned around and looked at the sea of flowers. She said lightly, "The fire in the cauldron is very strong. Your cultivation is only at the late stage of aura condensation. In order to learn alchemy, your divine sense must have suffered a lot. There are quite a lot of high-grade spirit stones in that pile of spirit stones." With her cultivation level, she naturally wouldn't be able to hide the fact that something was missing in this area. Only a few people knew the pain of having their divine sense injured. Even though they had endured it, Yuchincho still felt a lingering fear when he thought about it. He smiled unnaturally and looked at the sea of flowers. He changed the topic and said, "Big sister, look at the beautiful flowers in this golden pearl. The scenery is really good. I keep calling it golden pearl, golden pearl. It's really a bit hard to pronounce. Big sister, why don't you give this place a name?" The white fox shook her head lightly. A strand of hair hanging down her forehead was tucked behind her ear. She said slowly, "I can't. Little brother is brimming with talent. You should name it." "I'm brimming with talent?" Yuchincho knew his own limitations. However, the feeling of being praised by a beauty was really good. His mood also became better. He opened his arms, facing the sea of flowers. He closed his eyes and took a deep breath of the fragrance. He exhaled and opened his eyes. In the far west, there's a legendary ideal world called Utopia. I hope that one day, Golden Pearl can also become a legend and become an ideal world. Big sister, how about Utopia? Utopia? The white fox carefully thought about it. She frowned unconsciously. To be honest, she didn't think that there was anything nice about this name. In fact, it was a bit strange. However, she still nodded. She looked at the sea of flowers that was brimming with fragrance. She smiled and said, "Ideal world? I hope that I can live peacefully like this. This is my ideal world. Let's call it Utopia, according to little brother." Yuchincho smiled. He suddenly tilted his head and asked, "Big sister, do you have a name?" The white fox looked at him in surprise. When she turned back, her eyes were filled with confusion. A scene that had been buried for a long time came to her mind again. The scholar clumsily used a knife to cut a thorn hairpin. He made a few cuts on his hand. The faint red on the thorn hairpin was his blood. He used his sleeve to wipe it, but the red seemed to never be wiped off. The scholar happily held the thorn hairpin and ran over. He smiled and said, "Little Bai, look, I made this for you. Come, let me put it in for you." In fact, she saw the whole process of his clumsiness. She nodded her head shyly. She tied up her hair and let him put the thorn hairpin in her hair. The scholar looked at it carefully and smiled. "Little Bai, you look really good. Little Bai, let me give you a name." She looked at him happily and nodded her head. The scholar looked at the hairpin and thought for a while. He said, "Since you are called Little Bai, I will name you White Jingyang. What do you think? Do you like it?" She nodded her head and said, "I like it." The scholar smiled with satisfaction. It had been more than 200 years. The scholar was long gone. The hairpin was lost in the fierce battle in the capital city. It could not be found anymore. Perhaps it really was just a dream of lovers and butterflies. Since it was a dream, there would come a day when they would wake up. Should I wake up? Maybe I have already woken up? White Fox opened his mouth and let out a breath. A different expression flashed in his eyes. He looked at Yuchincho, who was waiting for his answer. He shook his head and sighed. "Perhaps. It has been a long time. I forgot and can't remember." Yuchincho was stunned. It was a troublesome thing for people to live for so long. She even forgot her own name. He touched his nose and smiled. "Anyway, I have given Jinju a name today. Big sister, why don't I give you a name too?" The white fox agreed with a soft end sound. She had a heavy responsibility. She must give her a name worthy of her beauty. Yuchincho walked around with his hands behind his back. Her surname was Bai, but what should she be called? The more he thought about it, the more he couldn't figure it out. After a long time, he scratched his head, but he still couldn't figure it out. Could she be called by Meili or by Pretty Beauty? If she came up with this name, he could really be called an idiot. Yuchincho painfully shook his head. He looked at the sea of flowers swaying in the wind. He wondered if Bai Xianhua would like it or not. After a moment of silence, he looked at the peerless beauty standing there with shame. He sighed. An idea flashed in his mind. A person from the myths and legends from his previous life appeared in front of him. She was also a beautiful and infatuated demon who had cultivated for 1,000 years. But she was a snake demon. Yuchincho painfully groaned. Didn't they say that he was talented? Could it be that his talent could only be plagiarized? Depressing. Big sister, I thought of a name. I don't know if you like it. By Sujin. What do you think? If it doesn't work, let me think again. Yu Qinsho added. Su as in simple, Zhun as in loyal. By Sujin. By Sujin. The white fox frowned. After pondering for a while, she turned around and floated away. It seemed that she didn't like it. Yu Qinsho felt bored. After thinking about it, he came to a sudden realization. He really wanted to slap himself twice. He really had nothing better to do. Why did he have to mention loyalty? She had finally forgotten about her past with great difficulty. Wasn't he intentionally reminding her? Thank you, little brother. I will be called by Sujin from now on. The white fox's voice floated over with the fragrance of flowers. Yu Qinsho was stunned. Chapter 78. Not long after, Guan Yu and Chun Feng each came back with a bag of spiritual herbs. Yu Qinsho took them and weighed them in his hand before asking, Is 100 enough? Yes, it's quite a lot. Yu Qinsho directly poured the spiritual herbs into the storage bag and threw the 2 bags back to the 2. He smiled and said, Continue to plant the spiritual herbs. Just wait for my good news. The 2 were so excited that they wanted to say some flattering words, but he had already disappeared. When he returned to the small house in the mulberry garden, the sky was not dark yet. Yu Qinsho immediately fell asleep. He had to prepare for the next day. He slept until the sky was still dark. When he heard the sound of Hibiscus getting up, he knew that she was going to work. He also woke up to help. Hibiscus couldn't refuse his kindness. The 2 were like before, one carrying a pole and the other carrying a ladle. They swayed out of the mulberry garden. They didn't know that Elder Lawn was staring at them with a frosty face not far away in the night. The 2 were busy until the sky was slightly bright. Yu Qinsho stood guard at the entrance of the inner garden of the mulberry garden. When there were people coming out of the garden in 2s and 3s, Yin Zixia also came out. The 2 tacitly left the mulberry garden and walked in the direction of the river. Hibiscus, who was busy in the garden, looked at their figures. She bit her lips and subconsciously raised her hand to touch the half of her face that was already disfigured. After the 2 walked along the river for a long distance, Yu Qinsho turned his head and looked around. When he saw that there was no one, he chuckled and said, Zixia, did you find out about Ong Kwangsung? Yes. Yin Zixia nodded and said, I asked Aunt Lon. Ong Kwangsung's disciple coming here has nothing to do with you. He's here to send an invitation to Fuxian Island to participate in the Exorcism Conference. Exorcism Conference? What does it do? Why haven't I heard of it? Yu Qinsho asked. Aunt Lon said that it's a conference led by Ong Kwangsung. It seems that they're preparing to set up an organization that specializes in eradicating the demonic path. Aunt Lon didn't tell me the details, Zixia said. Ong Kwangsung will take the lead. Hey, this Ong Kwangsung is really jumping higher and higher. Since when did they have the right to lead the cultivation world? Yu Qinsho shook his head and laughed. Yin Zixia admitted, Ong Kwangsung has been very domineering in recent years. Last year, he even caused trouble in our 100 Flowers Valley. What happened? Yu Qinsho asked curiously. As far as I know, although your 100 Flowers Valley is neither righteous nor demonic, it's not considered demonic either. What's Ong Kwangsung doing in the 100 Flowers Valley? Yin Zixia frowned and said, Sect leader Ong Kwangsung's grandson, Lu Jingguang, was staying in our inn in the 100 Flowers Valley. He was ambushed and injured, so he came to us to ask for an explanation. When she said the last part, her face turned slightly red. When Yin Zixia said this, he knew what was going on. Last year in the 100 Flowers Valley, the person who ambushed Lu Jingguang was none other than him. The guy was castrated by him, but it was really hard to say this out loud. Yu Qinsho smiled and said, I'm afraid your 100 Flowers Valley is not that easy to bully. Of course, our 100 Flowers Valley just sent out a few elders and explained the reason. Didn't Ong Kwangsung obediently retreat? Yin Zixia said with a proud expression on her face. The 2 of them chatted and laughed as they went to the secret alchemy room in the cave. As usual, Yin Zixia took out a small pile of ordinary spiritual herbs from her storage pouch. Yu Qianqiu scratched his head and said with a smile, "I'm afraid I won't be able to use these things today." Yin Zixia felt strange and said, "You're not practicing today?" Yu Qianqiu embarrassedly took out a few spiritual herbs from his storage pouch and threw them on the ground. Yin Zixia had also stayed in the mulberry garden for a long time, so she was not unfamiliar with these spiritual herbs. She couldn't help but be surprised and said, "Heart-guarding orchid, diamond fruit, gold mixed grass. These are spiritual herbs for refining foundation building pill." "Yes, I'm going to refine foundation building pill today." Yu Qianqiu stared at her eyes and said to see her reaction. Yin Zixia frowned and said, "Where did these spiritual herbs come from? Did you steal them from the garden?" "Steal them?" Yu Qianqiu said gloomily. "Do you think I'm that kind of person? What's more, even if I wanted to steal them, the spiritual herbs in the garden are not mature yet. Otherwise, I wouldn't have to wait for 3 years." "Then where do they come from?" Yin Zixia asked. Yu Qianqiu saw her asking so many questions, as if she didn't believe him. He was slightly unhappy, waved his hand, and said, "In any case, I didn't steal them. I'll explain it to you later. Right now, the most important thing is to refine the foundation building pill. I really need it." Yin Zixia also heard the unhappy tone in his words. Biting her lips, she put the spiritual herbs she just threw on the ground back into her storage pouch. The mechanism under the alchemy furnace was opened, and the surging earth fire immediately burned under the alchemy furnace. The secret room immediately became bright red, and the temperature rose in a flash. Yu Qianqiu got rid of distracting thoughts, adjusted his mood, adjusted the true qi in his body, and quietly waited for the alchemy furnace to preheat. Today's alchemy was not the same as usual. In the past, Yin Zixia brought a lot of spiritual herbs, but they were all the same common spiritual herbs, and the pills refined were also some common superficial ones. Today's alchemy was the foundation-building pill. Not only were the spiritual herbs precious, but it was also refined with 9 different spiritual herbs. It was not like refining a single one like before, and it also had a high requirement for the control of the divine sense. Last night, Yu Qianqiu had memorized the refining method and steps in the Jade butterfly pill recipe. He recited it fluently in his heart, and without any mistakes. He couldn't help but feel a little excited. The alchemy furnace was almost preheated. Standing on the side, his face hurt. Yu Qianqiu quickly put the 9 spiritual herbs into the alchemy furnace. Circulating his true qi, he hit the lid of the furnace with his palm, and the lid closed with a pong sound. Not daring to hesitate, his divine sense quickly entered the alchemy furnace and controlled the steaming hot air, quickly separating the 9 spiritual herbs. Not long after, the spiritual herbs in the 9 directions were all refined into a paste, and the 9 balls of air swirled in the air. After stabilizing, his divine sense rushed to the dirt-dispelling grass paste in the middle, and with great difficulty, it was divided into 8 parts and slowly drifted in the 8 directions of the spiritual herbs. Suddenly, the 8 big and 8 small balls of paste in the furnace shook. Yu Qianqiu secretly shouted, "Not good." Controlling 16 balls with his divine sense at once was a little difficult. When the dirt-dispelling grass was separated further and further, his divine sense finally couldn't control it, and the 16 balls of paste fell together on the red-hot bottom of the furnace, instantly turning into flying ash. It's over. The spiritual herbs for a foundation-building pill were all gone. Yu Qianqiu retracted his divine sense and regretfully opened his eyes. High in the air, he hit the lid of the furnace with his palm. The lid bounced up, and a ball of black ash sprayed out from the furnace. His nose and mouth could smell a burnt smell. Yin Zixia, who had been watching from the side, naturally knew that he had failed. She felt a little sad for him and comforted him. "Qianqiu, it's okay. After all, very few people can succeed on their first try." Yu Qianqiu shook his head with a bitter smile. Spirit Dawn of the Foundation building pills level were different from other low-level Spirit Dawn. They absolutely couldn't contain any impurities, or else it would definitely affect the efficacy of the Spirit Dawn. Foundation building was not easy, and if a foundation building pill with mediocre efficacy was added, then it would really make people cry. The effect of the dirt-dispelling grass was to remove the impurities in the spirit dawn, and the step of fusing it with other spiritual herbs was not something that could be avoided. Chapter 79. You don't need to comfort me. It's okay. Yu Qianqiu walked to the side, took out a middle-grade spirit stone, sat down cross-legged, and absorbed the spiritual energy into his body to repair his slightly damaged divine sense and true qi. Yan Zixia silently stood on the side, no longer saying anything. She put herself in his shoes. If she had not built her foundation and finally got a set of spirit herbs to refine a foundation-building pill, but then failed, one could imagine how she would feel. After restoring his body to its best state, Yu Qianqiu stood up and stretched his arms and chest, relaxing his muscles and bones. Under Yan Zixia's attentive gaze, he took out another set of spirit herbs from his storage pouch. He has more? Yan Zixia was slightly stunned and immediately shouted, "Wait!" Yu Qianqiu turned around and asked, "What's wrong?" Yan Zixia explained, "I don't mean anything else. Leave your set of spirit herbs first. I'll go ask great-grandma. Let her help you refine it. I think with her help, the success rate must be higher." Yu Qianqiu waved his hand. No, I think it's better not to let her know about this. Failure is the mother of success. Failure is a habit. Isn't it just a set of spirit herbs? It's okay. In his heart, he thought, damn, if it wasn't because I really can't find a place to refine pills, I don't even want to tell you. If that old granny knows I have spirit herbs so soon, who knows what the consequences will be? Yan Zixia didn't think so. The scene of Yu Qianqiu kneeling for the spirit herb seed was still vivid in her mind. It showed how important this spirit herb was to him. She wanted to say something, but in the end, she didn't say anything. The furnace was hot. Yu Qianqiu threw the spirit herbs in, waved his hand to cover the furnace, and used his divine sense to control the spirit herbs to separate and refine. When the dirt-dispelling grass paste was separated, he concentrated and was extremely careful. Unfortunately, his divine sense wasn't strong enough, and he failed again. If it wasn't for the pill recipe requiring the 8 spirit herbs to be refined at the same time, Yu Qianqiu really wanted to fuse them one by one. Biting her lips, Yan Zixia silently watched as Yu Qianqiu cleaned the ashes from the furnace and retrieved spiritual stones to recover his divine sense and true qi. She couldn't help but blame him for not listening to her advice. When Yu Qianqiu took out the 3rd set of spiritual grass, Yan Zixia's lips parted slightly in surprise. This was only possible for a great sect like the supporting Immortal Island. If it was any other sect, it would not be easy to gather 3 sets of spirit herbs to refine the foundation establishment pill. One must know that a set of spirit herbs to refine the foundation establishment pill could be sold for a lot of spirit stones in the cultivation world. If the conditions weren't right, one could imagine the consequences of trying to forcefully concoct the pellet. After failing again and again, Yu Qianqiu was starting to get a headache. He had already destroyed 10 sets of spiritual herbs, but he couldn't even fuse the dirt-dispelling grass. Although he still had 90 sets of spiritual herbs to back him up, he still couldn't make it. He clenched his teeth and tried 2 more sets of spiritual herbs. Every time, he almost failed. Thinking about the process of concoction, he realized that there was a problem with his mental state. He was impatient, nervous, excited, and his mental state was very unstable. His divine sense was originally not strong enough. Coupled with these factors that affected his control over his divine sense, he was afraid that this was the reason why he failed. Since he found the source of the problem, he would naturally have a solution. At least, that was what he thought. He took out the spirit stones and slowly absorbed the spiritual energy into his body. Then, he slowly recovered his true qi and divine sense. After recovering, he was not in a hurry to concoct the pellet. Instead, he relaxed his mental state and entered a state of emptiness. Yan Zixia had been paying attention to him. She didn't know why he needed such a long time to recover this time. After sitting cross-legged for a long time, Yuchincho slowly let out a breath. He stood up and quietly walked to the front of the furnace. There was no expression on his face. He casually took out a set of spiritual herbs from his storage bag and threw them into the furnace. Then, he closed the furnace lid. With the assistance of the previous dozen times, his movements were very smooth. His divine sense controlled the spiritual herbs and refined them. The paste of the dirt-dispelling grass was once again divided into 8 parts. However, he was not in a hurry to fuse them. He carefully felt the 16 balls of paste. After confirming that there was no problem with his mental state, he calmly controlled the 8 drops of paste to the other 8 balls of spiritual herbs. His divine sense was not strong enough to drive things. He could only stir the airflow in the furnace to drive it. This was the difference between reaching the foundation building stage and not reaching the foundation building stage. However, it also consumed more energy and true chi. With a calm mental state, there was really an effect. The 8 drops of dirt-dispelling grass were smoothly integrated into the 8 spiritual herbs. The 8 balls of chaos were also a lot bigger. Yuchincho couldn't help but become excited. His mood fluctuated. The 8 spiritual herbs floating in the furnace also swayed. Yuchincho was shocked. He immediately calmed down. The 16 balls became 8. It was much easier for his divine sense to control them. The next step was to remove the impurities in the spiritual herbs. After the 8 balls of paste were injected with the dirt-dispelling grass, they changed. The original paste gradually became clear. His divine sense controlled the airflow produced by the high temperature and spun the 8 spiritual herbs. As the spinning speed became faster and faster, impurities were thrown out. Seeing that the 8 balls of paste were about to turn into clear liquids of different colors, Yuchincho suddenly felt that his true chi was insufficient. Controlling the airflow with his divine sense at such a high speed consumed too much true chi. F***CK. Yuchincho groaned in pain in his heart. If he had known this would happen, he would have grabbed 2 handfuls of spirit stones. The step of removing the impurities was about to succeed, but his true chi was insufficient. How could he have the energy to split his divine sense to take out spirit stones from Utopia? He could only blame himself for not having enough experience. He could only watch as the 8 balls of spiritual liquid worshipped each other. He retracted his divine sense and opened the lid. This time, not only was there a ball of black ash, there was also a fragrant mist. Yuchincho felt his heart ache. Yin Zixia could also see that Yuchincho had improved compared to before. Although she had never concocted a foundation-building pill before, her cultivation level was still there. She wanted to help, but Yuchincho wouldn't let her. He stubbornly insisted on doing it herself. His body had recovered to its best state. Learning from his previous lesson, he took out a few handfuls of high-grade spirit stones and put them on his belt so that he could easily get them when he needed them. When he felt that his true chi was insufficient again, Yuchincho quickly took out a high-grade spirit stone from his waist and absorbed the spiritual energy into his body to replenish his true chi. After using 2 high-grade spirit stones in a row, the 8 balls of chaos finally turned into crystal-clear liquids of different colors. They floated in the furnace, looking very beautiful. His divine sense controlled the airflow and rearranged the essence of the 8 spiritual herbs. The gold chaos grass was placed in the middle. Although the medicinal effect of the spiritual herbs was magical, it was also very overbearing for the human body. Not to mention that taking several spiritual herbs at once was very difficult for the human body to bear. The role of the gold chaos grass was to neutralize the medicinal effect and prevent the different effects of the spiritual herbs from conflicting. The airflow rushed to the gold chaos grass spiritual liquid, divided it into 7 parts, and smoothly merged with the other spiritual liquids. Then the liquid of the 100-year-old ginseng and the 100-year-old lingji was adjusted and merged into a large ball. These 2 were good things to replenish the vitality. A large ball of nourishing spiritual liquid was again divided into 5 groups and merged with the remaining 5 spiritual liquids. It was to supplement the body's vitality when the medicinal effect of the spiritual herbs played a role in the body so that the body would not be damaged. After doing this, Yu Qianqiu did not dare to be careless. Now, it was the most critical moment. He once again absorbed a spirit stone to replenish his true qi and restore his divine sense. After adjusting the state of his body, except for the spirit gathering grass, the other 4 spiritual herbs rushed together. The airflow stirred them into a ball until they were mixed evenly. Then, they were quickly divided into 10 equal parts and placed in the center of the furnace to be baked. His divine sense tried its best to control the high temperature in the furnace and concentrate on the 10 fist-sized liquid. Moreover, he also had to maintain the 10 balls of liquid to turn evenly. To maintain such control, the consumption of true qi and divine sense was like running water. Yu Qianqiu was miserable. Fortunately, he had the foresight to insert a pile of upper-grade spirit stones into his belt. When he felt a little exhausted, he would immediately take out a spirit stone to absorb and replenish it. Yan Zixia, who was on the side, was dumbfounded. She had never seen someone refine pills like this. It was simply piling up spiritual herbs and spirit stones. In just 3 months, he had probably used more than 2,000 upper-grade spirit stones, which was equivalent to more than 20 million lower-grade spirit stones. Anyway, as the eldest miss of the 100 Flowers Palace, she had never used so many spirit stones. The dozens of spiritual herbs were even more frightening. Even a big sect like the Supporting Immortals Island could barely gather 10 sets every 3 years. Yu Qianqiu had taken out 14 sets so far. Moreover, she did not know whether he had more in his storage bag. Looking at his current state, he might really have to refine a furnace for him. Yan Zixia speechlessly shook her head and smiled bitterly. No wonder he wanted to refine it himself. With such a solid foundation, not only could he improve his alchemy skills, but he could also pile it up. Where did he get this thing that was comparable to the strength of a sect? The 10 fist-sized liquid gradually became dim from the beginning. Their volume also shrunk by half, and they were still shrinking. When they were the size of an egg, his divine sense quickly moved the spiritual liquid of the spirit gathering grass to the top of the furnace. It was evenly divided into 10 parts, corresponding to the 10 balls that had just formed the pill. As they rotated at a uniform speed, the spiritual liquid of the spirit gathering grass adhered to the surface evenly. The function of the spirit gathering grass was to lock the medicinal efficacy of the spirit pill and prevent it from evaporating. For a foundation-building pill, even a slight loss of medicinal efficacy would be enough to affect the success or failure of a cultivator who wanted to build his foundation. After doing all this, the last step was to roast it and shape it. There should not be any more major problems. With 10 foundation-building pills in front of him, even if Yu Qianqiu could control himself, he could not help but feel a little excited. Chapter 80. The 10 foundation-building pills in the furnace shook slightly. Yu Qianqiu was shocked. Since ancient times, there were many examples of people failing on the verge of success. He was secretly alarmed. He quickly calmed his mind and carefully took care of the 10 treasures. His cultivation level was not high. Refining pills in the aura refining realm was already a forced move, but it was not comparable to Ma Jiugu's abnormal cultivation level. Ma Jiugu's divine sense could freely control the pills in the furnace even though she was by the sea. Not long after, a wisp of green smoke rose from the top of the furnace, and the fragrance of pills overflowed from the furnace. Done. Although Yan Zixia knew it was almost done, she was still a little surprised. She had taken foundation-building pills before, so she was familiar with this fragrance. It was the fragrance of foundation-building pills, and it seemed to be stronger than the foundation-building pill she had taken before. She secretly pondered, I wonder how many pills he can refine in this furnace. Rise, Yu Qianqiu shouted. His voice was so excited that it changed its tone. As he split the furnace lid with his palm, he quickly withdrew his divine sense. Several purple shadows rushed out of the furnace due to the oppressive airflow in the furnace. Yu Qianqiu quickly jumped up and pulled up the hem of his gown. The 10 purple shadows were all wrapped in it. After landing on the ground, he opened up the hem, and a tempting smell hid his face. He closed his eyes and took a deep breath. He couldn't help but laugh. Fresh out of the furnace. Fresh out of the furnace, foundation building pills. I've succeeded. That smug look on his face was extremely annoying. He couldn't be blamed for being like this. After pursuing it day after day, anyone would be excited when it was realized. Yin Zixia quickly walked over and pulled open her clothes. Inside were a bunch of shiny purple pills. After counting them, she cried out in surprise, 10 pills. She couldn't help but stretch out her slender fingers and pinch one. She could still feel the slight heat in her hand. It was a lot. She put it in front of her nose and smelled it. Its color and smell were very pure. There was a faint layer of purple light on the outside of the pill. Obviously, it was a very successful furnace of pills. Yin Zixia was surprised, but a trace of envy appeared on her face. Even with her cultivation level, even if she was given more than 10 sets of 9-scented spiritual grasses to concoct foundation-building dawn, she wouldn't be able to guarantee that she would be able to concoct 10 foundation-building dawn in one furnace. Once she left the furnace, there would definitely be a few useless foundation-building dawn. Not to mention, she didn't even know the specific steps and methods to concoct foundation-building dawn. When the elixirs came out of the furnace just now, she clearly saw that there were 10 elixirs, no more, no less. Now that they were right in front of her, there was indeed not a single useless elixir. Qianqiu, who taught you this alchemy method? Yin Zixia asked as she put down the pill in her hand. Yu Qianqiu was looking at the pills and smiling foolishly. He didn't expect that he could concoct a furnace of pills with just a dozen sets of spiritual herbs. He had originally planned to concoct a furnace of pills with just a few dozen sets. It was really too unexpected. When he heard what she said, he put the medicinal pills into his storage bag, rubbed his nose, and said with a smile, "I figured it out myself. Didn't you see that I spent more than a dozen sets of spiritual plants to test it out?" "Ah, you figured it out yourself." Yin Zixia didn't suspect that he was lying, and said anxiously, "Qianqiu, quickly memorize the steps and methods of your alchemy. You mustn't forget them." Yu Qianqiu was stunned and asked why. "Don't you know? Although we use the same spiritual plants, the steps of alchemy are different for every sect and sect. A good recipe is a priceless treasure." Yin Zixia poured out everything she knew. When he heard that, Yu Qianqiu was overjoyed. The alchemy sect's pill recipe Jade disc was indeed not ordinary. Any random foundation-building pill recipe could be treated as a treasure. That brat Lu Jingwan's castration was worth it. However, he didn't think about it. Every single pill recipe in that pill recipe Jade disc, every single step and method of alchemy, were the crystallization of countless generations of the alchemy sect's painstaking efforts. If it weren't for that, with his loser standards, how could he possibly concoct a furnace of 10 pills with 100% success? Even if he did succeed, it would be strange if he didn't end up mostly crippled. It seemed like he hadn't seen the scene of crippled pills yet, so he didn't know the immensity of heaven and earth. Yu Qianqiu wasn't prepared to tell her about the pill recipe yet. He nodded solemnly and said in, "Zixia, thank you for your reminder. I understand. I'll think about it carefully now. All right, Zixia, can you get me something to eat? I'm a little hungry." He was wholeheartedly immersed in alchemy, and indeed hadn't eaten a drop of water for 2 days. "Okay, I'll go get it for you now." Before Yin Zixia left, she didn't forget to remind him, "You must remember this." After she left, Yu Qianqiu mumbled, "Remember my ass. I've remembered it since a year ago. Now I should think about what to do. I don't know if this girl's mouth is tight or not. No, 10 foundation-building dawn is really not enough. Aside from myself, there's still Guan Yu, Chun Feng, and Little Tian. In the future, there might be even more lackeys waiting for me to subdue. Not to mention, I don't know how many foundation-building dawn I'll use to successfully build my foundation. It seems like I can't be in a hurry to build my foundation right now. Yin Zixia flew back and forth by herself, so she came back very quickly. Not only did she bring the barbecued meat that Yu Qianqiu liked to eat, she also brought a bottle of wine. She seemed to be congratulating him. After Yu Qianqiu ate and drank to his heart's content, he patted his stomach and said, "I've already memorized it. Now, let's confirm the effect." With a successful experience, it would save a lot of time and effort to concoct again. When the furnace of foundation-building dawn came out, Yin Zixia was speechless. Unexpectedly, there were 10 foundation-building dawn in each furnace, and there wasn't a single waste dan. This success rate was a bit too high. Even if it was her great-grandmother, she might not necessarily be able to do it. After more than 10 furnaces, because he had been concocting the same kind of dan, he was already familiar with the things he needed to pay attention to. As the saying goes, practice makes perfect. When he had concocted the 50th batch, he had a fixed pattern. The control of the spiritual liquid inside the furnace was as easy as blowing off dust. He also knew how to control the heat flow inside the furnace by borrowing force. A furnace of dawn came out without using a single spirit stone. If other people saw this, who would believe that this was a chi refining stage disciple concocting dawn? However, no one could be like him, using a pile of precious spiritual herbs and high-grade spirit stones to practice. Towards the end, when a furnace of foundation-building dawn came out, there was no joy or worry on his face. He was already numb, as if concocting foundation-building dawn was as easy as eating a meal. Even Yin Zixia, who was watching from the side, was a bit numb. After concocting 100 batches of spiritual herbs, a full 10 days had passed. During this time, one furnace of dawn was destroyed, and it was due to his carelessness. Counting the 100 batches of spiritual herbs, he had actually succeeded in concocting 96 batches. Each batch contained 10 dawn. He had already concocted 960 foundation-building dawn. The earth fire that had been burning under the furnace for more than 10 days was finally sealed. Yu Qianqiu clapped his hands and exhaled, saying, "I'm done." Yin Zixia had also forgotten to count how many furnaces he had concocted. She walked over and asked, "You're not concocting anymore?" To be honest, watching someone do the same thing every day, knowing the result, was really boring. "I'm not concocting anymore. I've already memorized the method. It seems that the concocting method I figured out is still SOSO." Yu Qianqiu smiled. Yin Zixia rolled her eyes at him. She didn't care what he said. She had already thought it through. No matter how good the recipe was, she was too embarrassed to ask for it. If she asked for it, and he didn't give it to her, wouldn't that be too embarrassing? After all, it was not an ordinary pill recipe. Even if he gave it to her, she would owe him a huge favor. How was she supposed to repay him in the future? Chapter 81. The air was fresh, the sky was blue, the grass was green, the river was flowing, and Yin Zixia's figure was curvy. Along the way, Yu Qianqiu was in a good mood. He had more than 900 foundation-building pills on him. He believed that no matter how bad his aptitude was, he could still succeed in building his foundation. "Qianqiu, yes. Are you going to prepare to build your foundation when you go back?" Yin Zixia asked. Yu Qianqiu answered without hesitation, "Yes." "Do you still remember that you owe me a song?" Yu Qianqiu smiled and said, "I remember. I've been busy concocting pills recently. After I build my foundation, I'll definitely think of a song for you." He didn't really want to give her a song at that time, and was just perfunctory. Now, he couldn't think of a suitable song for her. After walking for a while, Yin Zixia asked again, "Do you want me to protect you when you build your foundation?" "Huh, no need. I'll just find a quiet place to hide." Yu Qianqiu refused. He also knew that no one could disturb him when he was building his foundation. Otherwise, he might go berserk. However, there was probably no safer place than Utopia in this world. He didn't even tell Chu Ping about that place, and it was not convenient to tell her now. Seeing that he refused, Yin Zixia bit her lip and didn't say anything. In his previous life, Yu Qianqiu was also a person who often visited flowers. Naturally, he could see that she was unhappy because of his refusal. He leaned over without hesitation, raised his hand, and slapped her perky buttocks. Ah! Yin Zixia screamed. She was accidentally attacked by the bad guy again. She blushed and quickly ran to the side. The assailant laughed proudly. After returning to the mulberry garden, the couple went back to their respective homes. When he returned to the house, the scene in front of him made Yu Qianqiu slightly stunned. Furong was actually covered with a quilt and lying on the bed with her back facing the outside. It was a bit unbelievable. Usually, even at night, she would sit cross-legged on the bed and cultivate. "Martial Aunt Furong, are you all right?" Yu Qianqiu asked. Furong didn't say anything. Her head was also covered with a quilt, so she couldn't see what was wrong with her. Raising his hand, he wanted to pull the blanket away to take a look, but after thinking about it, he gave up. No matter how ugly she was still a woman. She was kind enough to let him stay with her, but he was pulling her blanket. What was going on? "Martial uncle, are you asleep?" Yu Qianqiu shouted again. Hibiscus still didn't respond. It was a little strange. Yu Qianqiu shrugged his shoulders helplessly. He would go back to build his foundation first. He would come back to ask after he succeeded. He disappeared from his bed. If there was anyone that Guan Yu and Chun Feng missed the most during this period of time, it would undoubtedly be their boss, Yu Qianqiu. He had been gone for more than 10 days. There was no news at all. The two of them were worried sick. Even if he couldn't refine the foundation-building pill, he should at least come back and say hello. We don't blame you. In any case, there are plenty of spiritual herbs. You just have to continue working hard. The two of them lay on the bamboo pavilion stone platform listlessly. They didn't have the energy to do anything. The days of waiting were so painful. In the distance, Little Red Rabbit and Bai Sujin wandered about in the sea of flowers. "Boss is back." Chun Feng's eyes lit up, and he stood up. "Where?" Guan Yu's back was facing the outside, so he didn't see it for a moment. When he turned around, he saw Yu Qianqiu walking over from the forest listlessly, just like them. Guan Yu and Chun Feng looked at each other, a bad premonition spreading in their eyes. The pill concoction, this time, was probably fraught with grim possibilities. Otherwise, they wouldn't have seen Boss like this. From the moment Yu Qianqiu appeared, Bai Sujin already knew. Looking from afar, she couldn't help but frown. The former's dejected appearance fell into her eyes. She patted the little colt and said, "Red Rabbit, let's go back." "Boss, you're back." Guan Yu and Chun Feng walked out of the courtyard made of bamboo and welcomed him together. They both wanted to ask how the pill concoction was going, but when they saw Boss's appearance, they couldn't bring themselves to ask. The two of them hugged him and sat down in the bamboo pavilion. Yu Qianqiu rested his elbow on the stone platform, his fingers pinching his forehead silently. Not long after, Bai Sujin leisurely walked into the courtyard and asked, "What's wrong?" "Yeah, boss, what's wrong?" "Boss, if there's anything, just say it. We're not outsiders here." When Bai Sujin opened her mouth, the two of them couldn't wait to ask about it, but they just had to avoid the thing they wanted to know the most. How was the foundation-building pill going? Yu Qianqiu secretly laughed in his heart. "Let's see how long you can hold it in." He waved his hand at them and said, "Nothing much. I'm just really tired these few days. I'll be fine after some rest." After dilly-dallying for a while, Chun Feng finally couldn't help but ask, "Boss, have you concocted the foundation-building pill?" Yu Qianqiu straightforwardly said, "I have." Guan Yu's eyes lit up, and he asked, "How's the concoction going?" Yu Qianqiu indifferently said, "Nothing much." Hearing this, the two of them's expressions darkened, and Chun Feng said regretfully, "Did they all fail?" "What did you say?" Yu Qianqiu's beady eyes widened, and he said, "Have you ever seen me fail?" Every time he encountered such a situation, he would always think of a way to increase his boss's prestige without holding back. Bai Sujin, who had always been a bystander, was the clearest about this. She knew what he was going to do, so she turned around and smiled. Guan Yu and Chun Feng looked at each other, and they instantly became excited. The former stuttered, boss, where's the foundation? Foundation building pill? Where is it? This was the thing that Guan Yu had been looking forward to the most since he was chased out of Fushin Island. So how could he not be excited? Chen Feng, on the other hand, never thought that this day would really come. Two useless things, a mere foundation-building pill, can make you so excited. How are you going to do great things with me in the future? Calm down. You have to be calm. You have to be as calm as me, understand? Yu Qianshou said disdainfully. As he spoke, he took out 2 purple pills from his storage bag, and the fragrance of the pills instantly filled the bamboo pavilion. Even Bai Sujin couldn't help but take a few more glances. The two of them repeatedly admitted their mistakes. Yes, yes, yes. However, their eyes were fixed on the 2 purple pills. Guan Yu even cried out in surprise. It's really the foundation-building pill. He had taken 3 before, but unfortunately, he didn't succeed in building his foundation, so he naturally recognized it. The 2 quail-sized foundation-building pills were pinched in his palm, and he put them away. Guan Yu and Chen Feng were stunned. They didn't know what boss meant. Could it be that he didn't want to give them to them? Yu Qianshou held the foundation-building pills with his hands behind his back and said with a serious expression, "Don't worry, I will definitely give you these foundation-building pills. Also, I will give you a choice. I will give each of you 1 foundation-building pill. If you are willing to leave, I will let you go, and I will even beg my sister to return your natal primordial spirits. And from then on, we will have nothing to do with each other. There's another choice. I will still give you the foundation-building pills. You can choose to stay, but from then on, you have to sincerely treat me as boss and follow my orders. Think about it. Guan Yu, I know you have always been unconvinced by me as boss. You go first." The two of them looked at each other. They didn't know why Yu Qianshou would say this. Bai Sujin also looked over in shock. After a moment of silence, it was Chen Feng who took a step forward, bowed, and said, "From now on, Chen Feng will only follow boss's orders. I will not have any other thoughts. If I go against this oath, may the heavens and earth destroy me." When he first arrived, he really didn't like Yu Qianshou, but after being fooled a few times, he naturally didn't know that he was being fooled, so he already had some sort of blind worship for Yu Qianshou, which was why he swore such a heavy oath. Yu Qianshou nodded his head in satisfaction, then turned his gaze to Guan Yu. Guan Yu hesitated. He was much older than Chen Feng, so his eyes were naturally more mature. Actually, it didn't matter if he stayed, and it didn't matter if he sincerely treated Yu Qianshou as boss. The key was that the temptation of the natal primordial spirit was too great. At least from now on, he wouldn't be controlled by others at all times. But with 1 foundation-building pill, could he really build his foundation successfully? If he couldn't build his foundation successfully, what could he do even if he left? On the contrary, since Yu Qianshou could successfully refine it the first time, he could refine it a second and a third time. What this place didn't lack the least were spiritual herbs. Most importantly, even if he wanted to leave, would Yu Qianshou really let him go? Wasn't he afraid that he would leak the secret here? Thinking of this, Guan Yu was a little annoyed. Chen Feng, this be asterisk starred. So be it. Why did he have to make such a heavy oath? It should be known that cultivators, regardless of their cultivation, were different from ordinary people in the secular world. Once they made an oath, if they went against it, it would come true. But since he had already made an oath, it wouldn't be right if he didn't. After hesitating for a while, Guan Yu gritted his teeth, bowed, and said, "From now on, Guan Yu will only follow boss's orders. I will not have any other thoughts. If I go against this oath, may the heavens and earth destroy me." "Good," Yu Qianshou shouted. He turned his back to the two of them and raised his head to laugh. Suddenly, he turned around and glanced at the two of them coldly. His eyes were cold and emotionless, and a decisive and domineering aura surged out from his body. Under that aura, Guan Yu and Chen Feng actually subconsciously took a step back. The two of them were shocked. Bai Sujin didn't blink. This was the first time she saw Yu Qianshou with such an aura. In the blink of an eye, it was as if he had changed into a different person. It was as if she didn't recognize him. She could be considered to have seen the world. This kind of aura could only be emitted by someone who had been in a high position for a long time and was iron-blooded and murderous. It wasn't something that could be faked. Yu Qianqiu glanced at the two of them coldly and finally landed on Guan Yu. He stared for a long time until the latter felt a little scared. Then, he slowly said, "One day, the two of you will be proud of your choice." Chun Feng's mouth opened slightly, and he swallowed with difficulty. He never thought that boss had such a side to him. He was really unfathomable. The admiration in his heart couldn't help but increase a little. Just when a few of them were shocked, Yu Qianqiu suddenly returned to his usual smiling expression, making Guan Yu and Chun Feng very uncomfortable. Yu Qianqiu took out his hand from behind his back and spread out the 2 foundation-building pills in his palm. He smiled at the two of them and said, "Each of you can take one. I wish the two of you succeed in building your foundation soon." Chapter 82. The two of them were still not used to his fickleness. They nervously took a foundation-building pill each and bowed together. "Thank you, boss." Yu Qianqiu smiled. "What are you thanking me for? Let's quickly find a place to build our foundation." The two of them excitedly returned to their respective rooms in the bamboo house. As he watched the two of them leave, Yu Qianqiu narrowed his eyes. A cold light flashed in his eyes. If someone had really chosen to leave just now, he would not have hesitated to kill them. Apart from being afraid of revealing his secret, he could strongly feel that after passing the foundation-building stage, their future path would be different. He could guarantee that the two of them would definitely succeed in building their foundation because he had enough foundation-building pills in his hands. However, he did not need a disloyal subordinate. With the small interlude just now, if the two of them failed to build their foundation, he would once again take out foundation-building pills for them. Every time they failed, he would give them another foundation-building pill until they succeeded. He believed that repeated efforts would be more touching than a one-time effort. This was also the reason why he did not tell the two of them that he had a lot of foundation-building pills. If he wanted to become a real boss, the necessary strategy was unavoidable. It was not to target someone. Returning to his senses, he took out a foundation-building pill. With a light leap, he simply sat cross-legged on the stone platform. He turned his head towards Bai Sujin in the courtyard and smiled. He opened his mouth and swallowed the foundation-building pill. The pill tasted a little sweet and bitter. Before he could recover from the taste, it had already slipped into his stomach. He slowly closed his eyes and began to circulate his qi. Not long after, his body trembled as if he had been struck by lightning. A warm current surged from his abdomen to his surroundings, rushing to every part of his body. The strength was very strong and very overbearing. The Dan was refined by Yu Qianqiu himself. He knew that the effect of the forging tendon grass in the building foundation Dan had begun to take effect. The effect of the forging tendon grass was to destroy and expand the tendons and veins in the body. It could be regarded as one of the most important spirit herbs in the building foundation Dan. Equally important was the ice spirit seed. It had the effect of repairing the tendons and veins. In the beginning, it felt like a hot current, but soon it felt like a volcano was about to erupt. Wave after wave of the foundation building pellet rushed into every part of his body. It was so painful that he wanted to die. After a while, Yu Qianqiu felt like his soul had left his body. He didn't expect that the medicinal effect of the foundation building pellet would be so overbearing. If he waited until the medicinal effect of the whole foundation building pellet completely dissolved, he really didn't know how he would be able to endure it. If he could see his appearance now, he would definitely be shocked. The pores all over his body began to ooze black mucus. It was the first time for Bai Sujin to see a person take a Dan to build his foundation. The painful expression on Yu Qianqiu's face made her frown slightly. She was a demon, not a human, so she didn't need to take the Dan to improve her cultivation. However, demon cultivators also had their own way of suffering to improve their cultivation, which was no less than that of humans. Yu Qianqiu really felt that he couldn't endure it anymore. He had already entered a semi-conscious state. Suddenly, A warm current went straight up his back and rushed into his brain. His muddle-headed brain instantly became sober. The medicinal effect of the heart-guarding orchid had taken effect. It was still okay if he was not sober. Once he was sober, he could clearly feel the pain his body was enduring. At this time, he could no longer operate his cultivation to dissolve the Dan. All of his true chi had retracted back into his dantian. The tendons and veins in his body had been destroyed by the forging tendon grass, so he could no longer operate his cultivation normally. He could only rely on the building foundation Dan to operate on his own. Yu Qianqiu secretly smiled bitterly. His body felt like it was being roasted by fire and cut by thousands of knives. Because of the effect of the heart-guarding orchid, he could endure all of this with a clear mind. He estimated that he wouldn't be able to stop for at least 2 or 3 hours. Just when he was in so much pain that he wanted to scream, he didn't know how much time had passed. A cool feeling flowed from his abdomen to all parts of his body. The ice spirit seed that Yu Qianqiu had been looking forward to for a long time finally took effect. The broken tendons and veins began to repair. Wherever the cool feeling went, the tendons and veins gradually recovered. The heat in his body began to disperse. The places that had been cut by thousands of knives also felt like being gently caressed by a breeze. The comfortable feeling was indescribable. Yu Qianqiu felt so comfortable that he wanted to moan. Time passed slowly. What followed was the medicinal effect of the diamond fruit. It brought a slight electric shock numbness. The numbness spread along the tendons and veins, stabilizing the damaged and repaired tendons and veins. This feeling was neither painful nor uncomfortable. It was thousands of times better than the tyranny of the tendon forging grass. When all of the sensations receded like the tide, Yu Qianqiu felt a little drowsy. His whole body, including his spirit, felt very tired. He wanted to sleep. The destruction of his body and the reconstruction of it had consumed too much of his yuan qi. Fortunately, the 100-year ginseng and 100-year Ganoderma contained in the pill were great for replenishing his yuan qi. Otherwise, he would have died a long time ago with just the yuan qi in his body. He shook his head to dispel the drowsiness. He operated his martial arts to check his body. The result was very painful. He had failed to build his foundation. Just now, he felt that his whole body was suffering, but in fact, only about 1/10 of the tendons and veins in his body had expanded. In other words, the foundation-building pill had only allowed less than 1/10 of the body to build his foundation. In short, he had failed to build his foundation. Helplessly opening his eyes, he found Bai Sujin standing in front of him with an inquiring expression. Yu Qianqiu shook his head and smiled bitterly. Just as he opened his mouth, he was shocked by his own voice. His voice was so hoarse that it didn't sound like he was speaking. He swallowed his saliva with difficulty and prepared to accept his own voice. He said, "Sister, I failed." Bai Sujin frowned. At this time, Guan Yu and Chen Feng also rushed out of the bamboo house at the same time. The 3 people who had just built their foundation looked at each other, then looked at their own bodies. They found that their bodies were covered in a layer of black, sticky substance. The 3 of them asked in a croaky voice whether they had succeeded or failed to build their foundation. In the end, they all failed. Yu Qianqiu pointed at the spirit stones outside and said in a hoarse voice, "Everyone, don't be discouraged. First, use the spirit stones to recover your strength. I still have some foundation-building pills here." As he said that, he took out 2 foundation-building pills and threw them over. The 2 of them caught them and nodded their heads in joy to express their gratitude. Then, they quickly ran over to the pile of spirit stones. Yu Qianqiu smiled apologetically at Bai Sujin and immediately took out a spirit stone to recover his body. The latter slightly shook her head. After recovering his strength, he swallowed another foundation-building pill. The same pain began again. Judging from the result of building his foundation just now, he reckoned that he wouldn't succeed this time. As expected, he failed again. Dejectedly, Guan Yu walked over with his head hung low. He also failed again. Surprisingly, among the 3, Chen Feng succeeded the second time. After using 2 foundation-building pills, Chen Feng was so excited that he almost went crazy. He ran to Yu Qianshou, who was sitting on the stone platform, and kowtowed. It was obvious that he was sincerely grateful to Yu Qianshou. Damn it, this time he really lost face. As the boss, he actually lost to the little brother. Yu Qianshou cursed in his heart. He was very ashamed. Luckily, his face was covered by the black mucus, so his expression couldn't be seen. He threw another foundation-building pill to Guan Yu and swallowed one himself. In the end, the two unlucky fellows still failed. Yu Qianshou made up his mind and threw one foundation-building pill after another to Guan Yu. He also swallowed one after another, but he still failed again and again. When the two of them used the seventh foundation-building pill, Guan Yu screamed in the bamboo house. He also succeeded. He rushed out and knelt in front of Yu Qianshou. He kowtowed heavily a few times with sincerity. 7 foundation-building pills. Even if he had 2 immortal supporting badges and could return to Fushan Island twice, he would only get 6 foundation-building pills. He still wouldn't succeed. He couldn't repay this kindness. These were his heartfelt words. Yu Qianshou felt ashamed to face the two of them, but he didn't know that Chun Feng, who had washed himself clean, was secretly worshipping his boss. His boss actually had so many foundation-building pills that cultivators treated as treasures. He swallowed them one by one like they were candy. Who else in the cultivation world was more awesome than his boss? After all, foundation-building pills were foundation-building pills, not candy. There would definitely be an effect if he ate a lot of them. When the 12th foundation-building pill's medicinal effects completely dissolved, Yu Qianshou's body trembled. He felt like he was floating, and all the cells in his body seemed to have been reborn. The vital energy in his dantian automatically flowed into his meridians and circulated rapidly, turning into liquid vital energy before returning to his dantian. His body was so light, and the range of his divine sense had doubled. This kind of wonderful feeling was something that he couldn't feel when he was climbing the Qi refinement realm. Yu Qianshou knew that he had succeeded. He directly bounced up from the stone platform, broke through the bamboo pavilion, and landed in the courtyard. Following that, he let out a long roar. The entire Utopia's expression changed, and the ground seemed to be trembling and buzzing in response to his roar. The people in the courtyard almost couldn't stand steadily. Everyone was shocked, not knowing why Yu Qianshou would have such a reaction after successfully building his foundation-building pill. Chapter 83. The sky rumbled, and the originally white sky where the sun could not be seen suddenly became cloudy and clear. After a few moments, there was another loud noise in the sky, and the white mist suddenly gathered and scattered, changing its color, forming a dense layer of dark clouds, within which there were constantly sounds of thunder accompanied by lightning. The sky changed color. What was going on? They had never seen such a thing before. Facing the might of heaven and earth, that kind of powerful momentum made them feel powerless. Everyone felt like they had become ants, and their faces changed color. Bai Suzhen knew that after Yu Qianshou's cultivation increased, the space's territory would also expand. She had also seen it before, but she had never seen such a scene. Looking at the lightning in the dark clouds, that powerful force that could destroy everything, Bai Suzhen's face flashed with a trace of panic. Could it be that the final stage of her heavenly tribulation had arrived? Yu Qianshou stared at the sky. Suddenly, his heart felt as if everything in the world was waiting for something. Yu Qianshou closed his eyes and faced the heaven and earth with his arms spread out. His divine sense expanded infinitely, gradually becoming one with the heaven and earth. Feeling the frequency of the heaven and earth, Yu Qianshou's mouth revealed a trace of a smile. They are waiting for my call. Come. Yu Qianshou gently smiled and spread out his arms. He raised his head and stuck out his chest, standing in the shape of the character. An unknown force slowly lifted him into the sky. Guan Yu, Chun Feng, and Bai Suzhen were dumbfounded, not knowing what he was going to do. After his body rose to a certain position in the sky, Yu Qianshou fiercely opened his eyes. In an instant, The lightning in the clouds became more and more restless. The lightning flashed, and the thunder roared. First, a bolt of lightning quickly struck towards him, followed by countless bolts of lightning rushing towards him. All the lightning was released from the clouds, and with him, as the end point, it weaved into a huge ball of light. "Boss!" Chun Feng cried out in alarm. The three's faces turned pale. Being struck by so many lightning bolts, no one would be able to survive. How could this be? Bai Sujin clenched her teeth and flew towards the ball of light in the sky. She wanted to save Yu Qianqiu, regardless of whether he was dead or alive. Just as Bai Sujin was about to get close to the ball of lightning, a bolt of lightning as thick as a water tank struck directly at her from the clouds. Bai Sujin was shocked. She used all her strength of transcending tribulation to send out a dazzling white light, which fiercely collided with the lightning bolt. Bang! The powerful shock waves caused Guan Yu and Chun Feng to fall to the ground. The two of them sat on the ground with their mouths agape. To be able to fight against such a powerful sky lightning, that level of cultivation was simply too shocking. It was something that they did not even dare to imagine. The birds and beasts that were roaming around were running around in all directions. After the loud sound, Bai Sujin raised her head and spat out a mouthful of blood. Her body was sent flying diagonally to one side. Before she fell, another lightning bolt, which was twice as thick as the previous one, chased after her. A trace of despair flashed across Bai Sujin's face. That attack just now had exhausted all of her cultivation. She could no longer resist. "Stop!" A loud shout came from the sky. The lightning bolt that chased after her instantly disappeared without a trace. Bai Sujin safely fell into the sea of flowers. Her hair was messy and her clothes were untidy. She slowly stood up and helplessly looked at the sky. "Sister, don't worry. I'm fine." Yu Qianqiu's comforting voice came from the sky. After he finished speaking, the lightning bolts in the sky gradually disappeared back into the clouds. The black clouds also stopped surging. The earth also became quiet. Yu Qianqiu stood in midair unscathed. He crossed his arms over his chest and suddenly shouted, "Open!" He pushed his arms to the left and right, as if he was pushing away something extremely heavy. The earth trembled once again. The purple chaos that surrounded the sky and connected the earth quickly spread into the distance. The dark clouds in the sky churned again. They began to scatter from the center, chasing after the purple chaos in the distance. A piece of sky that was as blue velvet also spread out with the dark clouds. Suddenly, when the dark clouds retreated, they left behind a blazing sun in the blue sky, shining brightly on the earth. The clouds in the sky disappeared, and the earth was as calm as before. The sky that was originally hazy was replaced by a blue sky and a blazing sun. Yu Qianqiu was like a god who had created the world. He still stood in the sky, his clothes fluttering in the wind. Floating in the sky, he looked around. Utopia's territory had doubled in size again. Without a doubt, his cultivation level had increased again. He had finally broken through to the foundation establishment stage that he had been dreaming of. Yu Qianqiu could not help but laugh out loud in the sky. It had indeed calmed down. Guan Yu and Chun Feng got up and looked around, not knowing what to do. When they heard their boss-proud laughter, the two of them looked over at the same time. They turned their heads and looked at each other. F***CK. It was a strange cry in the sky. The two of them hurriedly looked over and saw Yu Qianqiu's limbs flapping as he turned into a black shadow and fell straight down. With a cry, he landed in the courtyard with his limbs facing the sky. Unreasonable. Yu Qianqiu lay on the ground and stared at the sky with his eyes wide open. He had been floating in the air with ease a moment ago. It was as if he could control the unknown power in the unseen world at will. The feeling of controlling the world was really good. Why did they suddenly lose contact with each other? It was as if everything that had happened just now was a dream, and the fall had woken him up. He moved his limbs that were about to fall apart and twisted his neck. Guan Yu and Chun Feng stood at the side and looked at him in bewilderment. Yu Qianqiu groaned. What are you looking at? Quick, help me up. Damn it, I nearly fell to my death. The two of them helped him up hesitantly. How did their boss, who had been like a god just now, become like this in the blink of an eye? His clothes were tattered, and the black marks left on his body after he built his foundation establishment were gone. He was no different from a beggar. Ouch! Yu Qianqiu stood up and groaned. He looked around. The bamboo house had all collapsed, and the trees in the forest were all over the place. The entire sea of flowers had also been destroyed. All of this proved that what had happened earlier was real and not a dream. Thinking of this, Yu Qianqiu said anxiously, Where's my sister? Quick, help me to my sister's place. Actually, when Bai Sujin saw him falling from the sky, she had already rushed over. As soon as she arrived, she heard her brother asking for her anxiously. She couldn't help but have a gentle expression on her face. She said softly, I'm here. Yu Qianqiu suddenly turned around. Bai Sujin's beautiful hair was messy, and her clothes were untidy. Her pale face was barely able to hang a smile, and the trace of blood at the corner of her mouth was eye-catching. Since the first time Yu Qianqiu saw her, she had always been gentle and quiet. Her body was always clean and spotless. Her beautiful and dignified appearance was unique in the world. When had she ever looked so battered and exhausted? She was trying to save him with her life just now. It was all his fault for being careless. Yu Qianqiu felt a sharp pain in his heart. He was extremely regretful, and his eyes were slightly moist. He pushed away the two people who were supporting him, and before his body could recover, he staggered over and hugged Bai Sujin tightly. He kept blaming himself. It's all my fault. It's all my fault. I didn't pay attention just now, and that's why you got injured. Bai Sujin's pale face had a layer of red. In more than 200 years, this was the first time she was hugged by a man, and it was a very tight hug. There were people watching from the side. She used a bit of strength to push Yu Qianqiu away. She shook her head and said, I'm fine. It's just that I used up too much of my vitality, and I'm a little weak. Are you all right? Yu Qianqiu also felt that he had unintentionally taken advantage of her. He scratched his head and said with a smile, I'm fine, I'm fine. It's just that my body is a little numb from the fall, and I haven't recovered yet. I'll be fine in a while. As he said that, he even used his fist to hit his chest, indicating that he was fine. Bai Sujin nodded and looked at him. She said softly, Go wash up. After saying that, she found a clean corner in the courtyard and sat down cross-legged with her eyes closed. Knowing that she wanted to recover her lost vitality, Yu Qianqiu looked at his body and said to his two subordinates, My limbs are still a little weak. I'll have to trouble the two of you to help me to wash up by the lake. The two nodded and supported him on his left and right. When they passed by the destroyed sea of flowers, Yu Qianqiu sighed, I made a little too much of a commotion just now. The two of you should fix it up again when you have time. My sister likes flowers. Also, I'll leave the ruined bamboo house in your hands. It was rare for Guan Yu and Chun Feng to say in unison yes. When they walked to the lake, they realized that their bodies seemed to have returned to normal. They tried to move around, and there was still a little discomfort, but there was no other reaction. Yu Qianqiu quickly took off his clothes and happily jumped into the lake. He was an expert swimmer in his previous life. At this moment, he was swimming freestyle, butterfly breaststroke, all kinds of swimming styles that Guan Yu and Chun Feng had never seen before were displayed. Chun Feng couldn't help but exclaim in admiration. After today, his admiration for Boss skyrocketed. Chapter 84. After washing up, Yu Qianqiu took out a brand new Fuxian Island uniform from his storage bag and put it on. He sat down cross-legged to check the condition of his body. Guan Yu and Chun Feng didn't need to say anything. They consciously stood on his left and right sides to protect him. Although there was no danger here, they seemed to have the awareness of being subordinates. His body's toughness had greatly increased. The width and toughness of the veins in his body were also incomparable. It seemed that after successfully building his foundation, his body, the carrier, had a qualitative leap. The true qi in his dantian had automatically refined into white liquid true qi. It shouldn't be called true qi now. It should be called essence qi. Unfortunately, it was only a small ball, not enough to fill the gap between his dantian's teeth. Essence qi revolved, and his body was immediately filled with power. After a little experience, he realized that the difference between cultivation before and after building his foundation was like heaven and earth. No wonder every cultivator wanted to break through to the foundation building stage. Apart from an increase in cultivation, there was another more important reason, and that was the increase in lifespan. In this era, a normal person could live to 60 or 70 years old. If it was a qi refinement cultivator, it wouldn't be a problem to live to 100 years old. Once he broke through to the foundation building stage, his lifespan would increase by another 50 years. There were 4 stages: foundation building, core formation, nascent soul, and tribulation passing. Each stage was divided into early, middle, and last stages. Each stage meant 50 years of lifespan. If he could cultivate to the last stage of tribulation passing, his lifespan would increase by another 600 years. There was also the legendary soul formation stage. It was said that it was also divided into 3 stages. The first stage would increase his lifespan by 800 years, and the third stage would increase his lifespan by 2,400 years. After breaking through to become a god, his lifespan would be as long as heaven and earth, but this was all a legend. Yu Qinshu thought about trying to see if there was a chance to live forever, but after thinking about it, he didn't think it was possible, although he had a bit of a dream. On the way back, Yu Qinshu walked in front while Guan Yu and Chun Feng consciously followed behind. Yu Qinshu smiled and didn't say anything. It was as if he had found the feeling of being a boss in his previous life. Yin Shang, didn't you say that when you reach the foundation building stage, you can ride a sword? Did your father or grandfather teach you anything about this? Yu Qinshu asked. Guan Yu shook his head and said, No, my grandfather and father have always abided by the Sect rules in supporting Immortal Island. They didn't impart anything to me without permission. After my grandfather passed away and my father's whereabouts were unknown, I didn't have the chance to learn from him. His tone was a little gloomy. Chun Feng looked at him in shock. It turned out that Guan Yu was from supporting Immortal Island. This was the first time he found out. Yu Qinshu nodded his head and thought that there was a reason why Guan Yu was expelled from the supporting Immortal Island. There were many people with low aptitudes in every sect and sect. Who had ever heard of a grandfather who was an elder of a sect, but his grandson couldn't even reach the foundation building realm and was expelled from the sect? Could it be that the supporting Immortal Island had given out so many foundation building pills every year? Was it so difficult for a dignified elder to get a few more building foundation on? This was probably related to his father and grandfather's pedantry. Boss, you're already at the foundation building stage. You can openly go to the scripture depository to learn all kinds of spells. There's no lack of sword kinesis flight spells there. Guan Yu added. Scripture depository? Yu Qinshu was a little gloomy. He knew that foundation building disciples could enter the scripture depository to learn spells, but didn't he want to hide it? Mulberry Garden's foundation building disciples would naturally be reported by Mulberry Garden to Wanfen Garden. Then, it would be passed on to the sect for confirmation before being recorded. Ma Jiugu and the others would inevitably ask after he succeeded in foundation building. How should he answer then? What was the point of not learning some defensive spells after succeeding in foundation building? Presumably, Guan Yu and Chun Feng were also looking forward to it. Yu Qinshu thought for a while and said with a frown, I'll think of a way to learn spells. In the collapsed bamboo courtyard, Bai Sujin was still sitting cross-legged there. Yu Qinshu didn't disturb her. He had already stayed here for 2 days, and staying too long wasn't a good idea. He turned around and looked at the mess he made and said to the two, I'll leave this place to you. When I come next time, I'll ask my sister to return your natal primordial spirits. The two were very excited and said in unison, yes. Back in the hut, Furong was no longer on the bed. At this hour, she should be working in the spiritual grass field. His eyes suddenly brightened when he glanced at the bed. It was inconvenient for him to go to the scripture depository, but couldn't Furong, who was at the foundation building stage, go? Wouldn't it be the same to ask her to write it down and bring it to me? The most important thing was that this girl was obedient and trustworthy. She was really the best person to do this. It was reasonable to say that with Yin Zixiao's cultivation level, she could also do it, but because she was from the 100 Flowers Valley, she rarely showed up in the mulberry garden. She definitely wouldn't go to a place as ostentatious as the scripture depository. Having made up his mind, he was in a good mood and leisurely walked to the spiritual grass field. There were a few familiar figures, but he didn't see Furong's shadow. Looking around, Yu Qianqiu frowned deeply. At the entrance of the mulberry garden, Furong was limping and carrying a load. She bit her lip and walked over with difficulty step by step. When Yu Qianqiu saw her, his first thought was that this girl was beaten by someone. It seemed that both her legs were injured. Otherwise, with her cultivation level at the late stage of foundation building, even if she could walk with one leg, carrying a load wouldn't be so difficult. Who was so wicked? Knowing that she had to carry a load and work every day, he actually hurt her legs. An indescribable anger ignited in Yu Qianqiu's chest. This girl was very timid. She never went to provoke people, and she never dared to provoke people who had such a big grudge against her that they actually wanted to mess with her like this. Yu Qianqiu took a deep breath and swallowed his anger. He hurriedly ran over and said, "Martial Uncle Furong, quickly give me the load." Who would have thought that when Furong saw him, it was as if she had seen a ghost. She was so scared that she retreated again and again. Unable to bear it, both of her legs were injured. She lost her balance, and the load on her small shoulders fell down. The feces in the 2 buckets spilled all over the ground. She also fell on her butt and was covered in dirt. Yu Qianqiu was stunned. Then, ignoring the dirt on the ground, he walked over to help her up. With a heavy expression, he asked, "What happened to your leg?" Furong, who was helped up, pushed him away and said fearfully, "It's nothing. I accidentally fell when I was walking." Their movements immediately attracted other people's attention. Quite a few female disciples who were squatting in the spiritual herb field and working stood up and looked in their direction. Someone with a cultivation level in the late stage of the foundation building realm could fall while walking and even injure both of her legs like this? Even a ghost wouldn't believe that. Yu Qianqiu snorted coldly and said, "Who did it?" Furong begged, "I beg you, don't worry about me. I beg you, hurry up and leave." Seeing that she didn't answer, Yu Qianqiu immediately disregarded everything and forcibly carried her to the side. He lifted up her long skirt to examine the injuries on her legs. Furong struggled with all her might. This caused quite a few female disciples in the spiritual herb field to cry out in alarm. The result of his examination was that the bones in the same position on both legs were broken, and both legs were very swollen. Fortunately, Furong was a cultivator with a certain level of cultivation. If it was a normal person, let alone working, they wouldn't even be able to walk. Yu Qianqiu let go of her and angrily said, "Why didn't you apply medicine? Why didn't you treat your injuries? Both your legs were broken, so why did you still run out to work? Who in the world did it?" Furong stared behind him and shook her head repeatedly in fright. Yu Qianqiu turned his head to look behind him. Elder Lon expressionlessly walked over. Elder Lon swept a glance at the feces scattered all over the ground, then stared at Furong and said coldly, "What's going on here?" Furong was so scared that she was trembling. Yu Qianqiu knew she was most afraid of Elder Lon, so he immediately explained, "Disciple accidentally bumped into Martial Uncle. That's why I ended up like this. Elder Lon, please punish me." You're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.